Previously on episode 1. Sarah's door slammed upstairs and Mary let out an exhale. Cabby rubbed her face against Mary's hip and she pet her in return. Brutus whined after his friend, then walked over to his trainer and her sister. "Winnie, she's upset, and rightfully so, but she will calm eventually," Mary assured her older sister. Winifred sighed, sitting down in the wooden chair by the fireplace, Cobbler sitting by her side. "Perhaps not this time, Mary. I did make a rather large mess of that trial for her," Winnie replied. "After she'd worked so hard during her solo test, too." Mary pulled another chair over by the fire next to her, her Pokemon following. "We will have another chance. All three of us will have another chance to guide lost souls. Our proctor said so himself. Not to mention we have other trials to face on our own, and we do not know when those will begin." She patted Winifred's hand. "Sarah will be all right. She just needs a little time." She turned to Brutus. "You heard me too, right, boy? Sarah will be fine." Brutus grinned and nodded. Winifred chuckled. "It is no wonder thou wert so well off thy first trial, sister. Thou knowest how to remain calm regardless of a situation," she said. Mary beamed at the compliment, always happy when her big sister said something out of praise. "It was no less difficult than yours and Sarah's. I dare say hers was the most difficult out of all three of us. Perhaps this next time I'll have a tougher journey ahead." As Mary settled into her own room for the what could be called night in purgatory, she remembered all of her Pokemon, most especially Broomy, and she hoped they were doing well. Brutus curled up on the floor and Cabby hopped up at the foot of the bed. Mary pet them each good night before crawling under the sheets and closing her eyes. When she awoke, Cabby and Brutus were missing. She started searching the room frantically until she realized, "Uh-oh, this is not my room." She hurriedly ran to the mirror on the wall and saw her younger self staring back at her. "And this is not my appearance," she gasped when she pulled back the curtains and the sun blasted into her eyes. "I am not in purgatory anymore. This is just like before. I've been sent on a new trial. Oh dear, and with Winnie in such a state of remorse, and Sarah so angry too. I've got to get back before they end up fighting it out to the, well, it cannot be death, as we are already dead, but regardless, it will be an explosive situation without my presence." Mary darted down the stairs and laid eyes on the woman who had greeted her a year previous in Pallet Town. "Good morning, Mary. It looks like you slept so well you were almost late for your meeting with Professor Elm next door." Her mother giggled as she got up from the table. She gave Mary a brand new red satchel as a present. "Oh, thank thee, Mother. It is lovely," Mary breathed. "Well, you needed a new bag after that run-in with those wild Pokemon," her mother said, and Mary just nodded as she had no idea what she was talking about. "You'd better get a move on. Don't want to keep the professor waiting." "Right." Mary was also eager to get over there. The sooner she met with the professor, the sooner she could get back to home to her sisters. She darted out the door and tripped right over a small blue Pokemon. She hit the dirt with a thud and winced from the shock. The Pokemon looked at her, also in discomfort, but apologetically. A young boy came running up a second later. "Oh, geez, Mary, I'm sorry. Meryl got away from me before I could take it to the Pokemon Center for a routine checkup. Sorry about that," he said, picking up the Meryl. That's okay. Mary hesitated as she assumed this boy knew the facade from this place, but she had no idea who he was. "Boy, that fall must have really made you bonk your head. It's Ethan, your best friend," he chuckled. "Oh, yes, I was only jesting thee." Mary quickly recovered as she got up. "I apologize for tripping on thy Pokemon. I would never do that intentionally." "Oh, I know. You love Pokemon as much as I do. Say, aren't you supposed to be getting your first one today?" Ethan asked. "Professor Elm said you were there yesterday." "Yes, I'm on my way over now," Mary told him, then looked around. Mary," Ethan pointed to the big lab. "That way." "I knew that," she lied nervously. "Hey, it's okay to be a little mixed up right now. This is an exciting day. I hope you picked the best one of the bunch," he encouraged her. "I'm not seeking the best, just the right one." Mary recalled how so many trainers had been afraid to tackle Broomy's case, but she took it head on. "Good luck, and I can't wait to see your new partner." Mary ran off for the building, eager to get started. At the back of her mind, all she could think about was the volatile situation back in purgatory. She walked inside and was taken to the backyard where Professor Elm was checking over 3 Pokemon. He saw her and grinned. "Hiya, Mary! You're just in time for our meeting, but unfortunately the Pokemon I had asked to be sent here for you to choose from were delayed," he sighed. Mary looked at the 3 he was examining. "Are these not them?" she asked. He shook his head. These came to me yesterday from the safari zone on the other side of the region. Apparently, these 3 caused so much trouble they have to completely refurbish the safari zone. I've been tasked with taming them before they can go back to their environment, Elm explained, then raised an eyebrow. You aren't interested in these 3, are you? I could help you with at least one of them, Mary told him. She was trying very hard to persuade the professor into letting her start her journey today. I'm really not too bad at— Professor Elm, Mr. Pokemon called and said he has a package for you. Should I tell him you can't get it right now? His assistant called from the door. Professor Elm hurried over to speak with his assistant. As soon as he left, Mary watched the 3 Pokemon start roughhousing. The Dusclops was not interested in battling and simply fired defensive shots as it ran away. Heracross was the aggressive bully of the 3, looking for every opportunity to aggravate them once provoked. Togekiss, though, as Mary observed, was the instigator. She saw it flap its wings into the back of Heracross's horn as it lifted off. Now there was a full-blown 3-way battle going on while the professor's back was turned. Mary decided to step in and help. She first grabbed Dusclops' hand and pulled him away into the shadows of the building. She could tell this was a ghost type, so she told him to hide there. Next thing she did was find a berry bush and pluck a bunch off before lobbing them past Heracross, who went buzzing after them. These Pokemon liked sweet things. Lastly, she climbed up a small tree where Togekiss had perched, laughing at the other 2, and pinned its wings behind its back. It looked at her, and she gave him a stern look. No more fighting, she said strictly. Down on the ground now so the professor can finish with you 3. Togekiss listened, fixated on Mary's gaze. When she touched down from the tree, Professor Elm stared at her, mouth agape. Mary, did you stop these 3 from fighting? He asked in astonishment. 'Tis no different than when I stopped my sisters from fighting, she shrugged. You simply need to calm everyone. That was impressive, to say the least. You actually might be able to help me out with these 3. Instead of taking one of the Pokemon I requested for you, why not take one of these 3 and teach it to behave? You're already great with them, he suggested, and Mary held back a smirk. She got what she wanted. I would love to, she responded genuinely. She examined the 3 again. Dusclops needs time to relax and give its nerves some time to unwind. I think it best that sweet one stay here. She looked at Heracross. Well, this time Heracross did not initiate the battling. 'Tis far too aggressive as is, so it needs a firmer hand to guide it. She settled her gaze on Togekiss, who had yet to stop staring at her. I will take the Togekiss as my partner. He has a very difficult personality, but I know I can make friends with him. His spirit reminds me of my sisters. Then take this Pokeball. Professor Elm handed her the Pokeball Togekiss had been delivered in. The Safari Warden had nicknamed this Togekiss Rubik's because, as you said, it has a hard personality to solve, just like the block puzzle. Rubik's, huh? Mary walked over to him and patted his head. Then I shall keep the name. Hello, Rubik's. I am going to be thy trainer. Will that suit you? Rubik's looked at her and then smiled in agreement. Actually, Mary, now that you have a Pokemon, I need to finish the exams of Heracross and Dusclops. Would you mind running an errand for me? My friend, Mr. Pokemon, has found a mysterious Pokemon egg and wants it delivered to me today. So, that's how Mary and Rubik's went on their first journey together in the Johto region. Mary could tell this was not the Kanto region she once knew so well as she stepped back into New Barktown. Mary allowed Rubik's to stay out of his Pokeball, and he fluttered nearby. Ethan was shocked when she introduced her Pokemon to him. Mary prepared for their trip, and her mother gave her a device called a Pokegear. She'd put in her number, Ethan's, and Professor Elm's so they could call her when needed. As Mary and Rubik's traveled, she spoke to him about herself so they could get to know each other better. Just about every wild Pokemon that jumped out, Mary couldn't stop Rubik's from battling. She noticed the determined look in his eyes every time he fought, and she was beginning to understand him. After passing through Cherry Grove City, Mary and Rubik's met a man who gave them an apricorn case. These pods could be made into Pokeballs. It took most of the day into the evening before Mary reached Mr. Pokemon's house. After receiving the egg from him, another visitor came calling. Professor Oak! Mary exclaimed. Oh, hello. You're a new face? Professor Oak smiled at her. And what a magnificent Togekiss you have. Such a rare Pokemon. What is your name? Mary suddenly realized he wasn't kidding. Mary Sanderson, sir, she replied a bit more timidly now. I am a new trainer. If Togekiss is your first Pokemon, then you might be a good candidate to have one of these. He handed her a Pokedex. This has information on every Pokemon in the world. Use it wisely. Yes, sir, Mary said, then bid farewell to the both of them. Rubix looked at her as worry washed over her face. The Pokedex beeped to life once they were alone. Hello, Mary Sanderson. As you can see, your last trial has been wiped from every mind in the world you now exist in. You are to start with a clean slate, and I have been tasked with recording your progress. I assume you remember the rules. I must gather the 8 gym badges of the region, then I must become champion to complete the trial. If one of my Pokemon is knocked out in battle, it will die. She recalled everything. Correct. As you are aware, your old Pokemon are not with you. Charizard and Mightyena have entered a stasis. You may find them on your journey, but they will be waiting for you when the trial is over. As for your old Pokemon, they were released back into the wilds of Kanto, so do not rely on trying to find them again. You are to start over, it explained. Mary nodded with a gulp. Your trial will officially begin when you have received Pokeballs. Good luck. It went silent. Come, Rubix. I fear I may have dragged thee into a difficult situation, she said remorsefully. Rubix, still unsure of Mary, fluttered alongside her as they set off for Cherry Grove. They slept at the Pokemon Center, and in the middle of the night, Mary got a frantic call on her Pokegear that scared both her and Rubix half to death. Someone had stolen Heracross from the lab. Mary and Rubix set out together as soon as the call ended. They weren't waiting until morning to get back to New Barktown. Mary ran down the dirt road and ran smack into a teenage boy wearing baggy clothes, a hat, and had the word ice shaved in the back of his head. Mary recognized him immediately. This was one of the boys she and her sisters had locked up. Watch it, kid! You looking for trouble? He snapped at her. No, I was merely hurrying to my hometown. Please get out of my way, she said, and he chuckled. I'm sorry, your way? You were in my way, kid, he corrected her. Mary groaned. Oh, I do not have time for this nonsense. Move, boy! She started to go around him, but he shoved her back, causing her to stumble and fall. Rubix helped her back up and glared at the boy. The name is not Boy, it's Ice. Your Togekiss there looks like it's itching for a fight. Ice smirked and pulled a Pokeball from his pocket, and I'm happy to give it one as payback for you running into me. Heracross! He sent in the very Heracross that was stolen. Rubix flew out in front of Mary immediately as she got back up. Fine then, she growled. We will end this quickly. Rubix, use thy air slash attack. Rubix lit up one of his wings with energy, dive-bombed the Heracross, struck, and knocked it out immediately. Ice looked angry and shocked at the same time as Rubix fluttered in front of Mary. This kid was an expert. He returned Heracross to its ball and huffed. Yeah, well, you had the type advantage. You won't be so lucky next time. He ran off with his tail between his legs. Mary smiled at Rubix, who returned the gesture. They returned to New Bark and helped Professor Elm clear things up with Officer Jenny. He told her about the gym challenge, and she signed up with his recommendation. Her trial was on. Her mother bid her words of encouragement, and Ethan gave her some Pokeballs. Now the death rule was in place. The first 2 Pokemon Mary tried to catch, Rubix knocked out from excitement. She gave him a light scolding for being too rough, but she was proud of him, too. Rubix was starting to warm up to her. When they met with an Aggron, he held back, and they caught October. October had been injured by a fire type, so Mary helped bandage him up, and he quickly fell for his new trainer. Up on Route 31, they managed to add a Drowsy to the team that was so strong, Mary named her Hercules. In Dark Cave, they caught Barbossa, the fire ground type Numel. Mary's new friends were all very different than her team before, and after they checked into Violet City's Pokemon Center, she had them all sit on the floor in their room with her so she could get to know them better. The calming circle was fun, as she was already attached to all 4 of them. Rubix still had some trouble keeping his wings to himself, so Mary had to quell tensions a couple of times, but eventually all was well. Everyone slept pretty spread out in the room for the most part, with the exception of October, who was surprisingly more timid than Mary had imagined he'd be. He slept right next to her bed, curled up like a baby. The next day, they decided to visit the landmark Sprout Tower in the town. Mary thought there might be some useful information about the region inside that would help her journey. As she was entering the building, a Huntail jumped her, and with the help of her Pokemon, she caught Ka. Mary learned a bit more about the Johto region as she battled her way to the top floor, where ice just happened to be threatening the head monk. He was after the move Flash, so he could go explore Dark Cave. He ended up defeating the monk in battle and winning the TM, but he was scolded for treating his Heracross so harshly. He and Mary locked eyes and she growled at him as he left. Mary also had to battle the monk, but her victory came with praise for how well she treated her Pokemon. He said she had the right heart to be a Pokemon trainer. "You said you only just caught a few of these Pokemon yesterday, correct?" he asked, and she nodded. "I am impressed that they trust you as much as they do given such a short amount of time. You will be a great trainer." "Thank thee, sir. Dost thou think we are ready to battle in the Violet City Gym?" she asked. He thought for a moment. "Heed this advice. You might want to train just a bit longer before taking on Falkner. He is very adept at battling and should not be taken lightly." "Then that is what we shall do," Mary said. She took her Pokemon out to Route 31, and they trained together until everyone felt confident. Mary knew she needed to get home before her sisters started fighting, but being hasty would only keep her out here longer. She never had to start her journey over last time, and she intended to keep that streak going. Rubix's love of battling was really showing during his training, but again, Mary could not ignore the look in his eyes. He was trying to prove something. October was a timid battler, not wanting to even step on a flower, but Mary encouraged him that by being precise, he'd never harm one petal. Hercules was strong, but she wanted Mary to train her defense stats, so that's what they worked on the most. Barbossa was slow, so he trained more for speed, and Ka needed to rein in his aggression, so Mary was teaching him restraint. After that, they slept in the Pokemon Center, Ka in the bathtub full of water. Rubik still slept on the top bunk, but watched Mary stroking October to help him fall asleep. Sunrise saw them at the door of Violet City Gym. It had been roughly a year since Mary's last journey, so she knew she was a little rusty, but it was time to oil her techniques. She, along with October, were lifted up to a high platform, the two of them clinging to each other out of fear. He battled well against the gym trainers, and then they stepped up to Falkner. "So you come seeking a badge, no doubt, and you disgrace my feathered walls with a rock type? You're not worthy of facing my magnificent birds in battle. Instead, you'll face my auxiliary team," Falkner said. "Thou taketh the flying type very seriously. I am prepared for whatever thou throws at me out of those Pokeballs, be thy bird or not," Mary said confidently. "Good. Then I'm going to knock out that rock type from the start. Luminion!" Falkner sent in a water type. "October, please sit this one out," Mary requested. "Rubix, take flight." Rubix burst into battle, and Falkner almost stopped the battle to examine her flying type, he was so excited. Rubix opened with Air Slash, which dealt massive damage, but not enough to knock it out. Luminion fired Water Gun, which hardly grazed Rubix. He smirked and went in again with Air Slash, knocking it out, but he hadn't waited for Mary's order. Rubix looked at her, waiting for praise, but she sighed. "Thou must wait until I give a command." "Good work, Rubix, but patience is the key," she reminded him. Rubix nodded, looking dismayed. "Do not hang thy head. I'm still behind thee," she promised, and he perked up. Bronzor was the last opponent, and Mary knew Rubix was probably still the best choice for the match right now. Every time she called for Aurasphere, he delivered precisely. Bronzor weakened him a few times with confusion, but their exchange of blows ended with Rubix as the victor. Mary cheered and ran forward, her arms open for Rubix. He sat on the battlefield unaware until Mary hugged him tightly. Rubix looked at her in surprise, then put his head against hers. Falkner walked up to them and clapped. "I've never gotten to see a Togekiss up close before, and to battle one was even better. I'll give you any amount of money right now for your Togekiss," he babbled. Mary saw Rubix look nervous, then she smiled softly, stroking his feathers. "Sorry, he will not be sold. He is my friend." She declined the offer. Falkner let out a disappointed exhale. "Then you have most definitely earned the Zephyr Badge." He handed her the first badge on her new journey, and she pinned it to her cloak. As they exited the gym, Professor Elm's assistant caught her before she went on. He told her they wanted her to look after the egg she'd delivered them. He handed it off to her, and as soon as she put her hands on it, it glowed. From the distance, Mary saw a woman in a kimono watching her with a small smile on her face. She looked down at the egg, and suddenly, in a flash, she held a baby Bulbasaur in her hands. When she looked up again, the woman was gone, and her Pokedex beeped. Bulbasaur has been registered to your Pokedex. This Bulbasaur shares the same DNA as Sarah Sanderson's Ivysaur named Cobweb. It appears to be the offspring. Sarah's Ivysaur, huh? Mary smiled as the tiny bulbed Pokemon looked up at her. Then I shall name thee Cobweb Jr. after thy father. Cobweb Jr. grinned and nestled in her arms. And now, previously on episode 2. Mary and her team did some training near Violet City so Cobweb Jr. could catch up to his new friends. As they were doing so, a huge Pokemon called Arcanine popped out of the grass, and her Pokedex said that this was a Pokemon specially selected for her. Mary caught Flare and sent her to the meadow for the moment. Once all the training was finished, they spent the night in Violet City, Cobweb Jr. sleeping on the bed with Mary. The next day, Mary checked the map on her Pokegear and started off for the nearby ruins of Alph. Here, she studied more about the Johto region and some of the Pokemon that lived there. She also caught a Murkrow named Poe. She didn't manage to get an encounter on the next route as it was being stubborn, but Mary sort of found that a blessing since she already had Rubik's to deal with. At a Pokemon Center near Union Cave, she was gifted a fishing rod which she decided to use immediately. The only place the Pokedex allowed her to use it was Violet City, so she began the trek back. What she ended up fishing out was a Metapod that had fallen into the pond. She named him Norman. It took all day to get back to Union Cave's Pokemon Center, so she spent the night there. Union Cave brought the addition of Alicia the Piloswine to the meadow, and on the other side of the cave they caught Audrey too, the Craydilly. When they finally reached Azalea Town, Mary took a break with her team. She watched as they all started playing together. Cobweb Jr., the baby of the group, had recently taken a shine to following Barbossa around. They were both pretty young, so their childlike playfulness meshed well together. Ka splashed in the small pond, refreshing his scales as Hercules tried to teach him to meditate. Rubix stayed beside Mary, observing his fellow teammates, even though she encouraged him to go have some fun too. She felt bad for her Togekiss feeling so badly about himself, so she stroked his feathers instead of pushing. As she rested with her friends, she heard October start bellowing. He stomped through the area, crying out as a Spearow was pecking at him from behind. Apparently, when he was practicing his headbutt attack on a tree, he knocked down the Spearow. "Hercules, help out thy friend and use hypnosis," Mary commanded, jumping to her feet. Her Drowsy sprang into action and put the Spearow to sleep as October hid behind Mary. She threw a Pokeball at the bird and, click! Spearow has been registered to your Pokedex. Mary picked up the ball, then turned to October. "Sweetheart, Charlie here was not hurting thee. Thou art a rock and steel type, and as such, pretty well immune to his attacks. Now I know the shock was a lot, but thou art all right." October still looked a little freaked out, and Mary rubbed his face gently. Come on, give me a smile." October looked at her and beamed. "That's my boy. Now, we'll work on your confidence as we travel together. It will be all right. We're going to—" Mary stopped talking and started to sniff the air. Something smelled familiar. She saw a swatch of black run by out of the corner of her eye, and she whipped her head around. Impossible. I got rid of all those pests when I was in Kanto a year ago. As a man dressed in black ran by, dragging a slowpoke with him, Mary saw a red R on his chest. She growled lowly, "Oh, Team Rocket, what are they planning to do with that little slowpoke?" As she was questioning the scene before her, an elderly gentleman ran by at top speed. He was chasing down the Team Rocket grunt. "I'll save you, Slowpoke! No one is cutting off your tail as long as old Kurt is here," he declared. Mary returned everyone to their Pokeballs, save Hercules, and ran off after him. "Those dastardly villains, I'll not stand for their despicable deeds this time." Mary followed Kurt all the way to the Slowpoke well, and when she got to the bottom, she'd found he'd fallen off the ladder and hurt his back. He begged her to stop Team Rocket from cutting off any more slowpoke tails. They were hurting the poor creatures just to make a profit off the meat by shipping it to a distant region where it was considered a delicacy. Mary propped the man up and dashed inside the cavern. From deep within she heard a voice questioning why she even cared to help these creatures. Why bother helping an old man and a bunch of animals when she endangered the lives of others for so many years? Well, the answer wasn't clear to even her yet, but she felt it in her bones that she needed to assist them, so that's exactly what she did. The first battle ended in victory. A pair of grunts were bullying a wild Meowth, so she caught Marie and sent her to the meadow for safety. Every grunt that came at her fell to her Pokemon's power. Sooner than anyone expected, she was standing face to face with the leader of this operation. "Well, it seems we have an uninvited guest to our little slowpoke party. A child, no less," he smirked. "Taking out my grunts was no easy feat, I'll give you that. But you're interfering with my business, just like that boy last year. Red." His fists clenched at the mention of the name. "You act just like that hero boy that destroyed Team Rocket and exiled Giovanni. Wait, but didn't I?" she muttered, then remembered that her Pokedex had said something. "So when my trial ended and the memories of me were erased, this boy Red took my place." "Excuse me, are you even listening?" Proton shouted, and Mary turned her attention back towards him. "It's rude to daydream when an adult is talking to you." "Apologies," Mary said, then smirked, "but thy speech was so boring I could not help but drift off." Proton ground his teeth. "Boring, am I? Then let's see how boring you find this. Go, Breloom!" He sent in a grass and fighting type. "Attack! Barbossa, Ember attack!" Mary sent in her Numel. Breloom hit him with Stun Spore, but his Ember came off at critical power and knocked it out. "Good boy, Barbossa!" "Sandslash! In that little pest!" Sandslash's claws gleamed in the light. Mary called Barbossa back and decided now was a good time for Cobweb's first official battle. She sent in her Bulbasaur, and Cobweb Jr. stopped his front feet and stared down the Sandslash. Mary was surprised at the hostility. Her Pokedex beeped. In Sarah Sanderson's journey through the Kanto region, a Sandslash ended her first attempt. Bulbasaur's father, Ivysaur, defeated that Sandslash in revenge later on. It seems your Bulbasaur knows of the long-standing feud. "Oh, I see. Cobweb, make thy father proud. Use Vine Whip," Mary commanded. Cobweb Jr. charged at the Sandslash, took a scratch, then smacked it with Vine Whip, dealing a lot of damage. He turned on a dime as Sandslash used Defense Curl, and he finished it off with Vine Whip. Barbossa cheered for Cobweb, and the two gave each other friendly headbutts and congratulations. Proton, mouth agape, stared at Mary, who crossed her arms as the two young Pokemon stood at her side. "Now, thou shalt leave these Slowpoke be, and be on thy way," Mary told him. Proton growled under his breath, then pointed a finger at her. "You may have defeated us today, but Team Rocket is rebuilding as we speak. You won the battle, but the war is only beginning," he snarled. "We'll meet again." Team Rocket fled the cave, and Mary kissed her two little boys on their noses. Barbossa and Cobweb snuggled her happily. Mary looked at all the tailless Slowpoke and took some bandages out of her bag. She wrapped each one up gently, a pang of guilt flashing through her head every time one of them smiled at her. She was healing these little creatures, but she had put so many children through worse pain. Before she got lost in her thoughts, Kurt limped into the cavern. "Thank you for all your help, young lady. These Slowpoke will be taken care of, and their tails will grow back stronger. And thanks for your efforts. I'd like to give you something in return," he told her. "I'm a Pokeball maker by trade, and if you have apricorns, I can make Pokeballs for you. Here's a sample." He handed her a fastball. "Thank you kindly," Mary replied. "Wouldst thou happen to know if there is a gym in Azalea?" "Bugsy is the leader you seek. Good luck in your battle against his bug types," Kurt told her. She helped him get out of the well, and she took her Pokemon to the center, where everyone slept for the night. Cobweb huddled up behind her knees. Barbossa was at her feet, right next to his buddy. Mary liked the company, as it reminded her of Cabby. Her hand rested on October's back, and he slept with a smile on his face. Caw, of course, was in the bathtub, and Hercules slept on the window seat. Rubix again watched Mary fall asleep with her Pokemon from the top bunk. He couldn't bring himself to go down with the others just yet, even though he was beginning to fall for Mary. The next day, Mary got up before her Pokemon and noticed how isolated Rubix was making himself. She climbed up where he was sleeping and stroked his feathers softly. He woke up and looked at her. "You can come down with the rest of us. No one is your enemy here. We are all friends. You know, I once raised a Pokemon who was a bigger challenge than you. It was a legendary Pokemon called Rayquaza, but I called him Broomy. He was aggressive at first, but we spent time together and he became my best friend. He coiled around our whole team when we slept outdoors. Rubix, there is no need to be so afraid of getting close to us," she told him quietly, and Rubix listened intently. "Come on, we have a gym battle today." The team gathered up and walked for the gym. Mary was ready for the fights ahead today, and that next badge would put her closer to her sisters. They battled their way through the gym trainers, and at one point, Cobweb Jr. took down 3 Pokemon on his own and began to glow. Mary gasped as his bulb bloomed into a flower bud, and he evolved. "Ivysaur has been registered to your Pokedex." "Junior, you look so handsome!" Mary grinned and hugged her newly evolved boy. Barbossa and Cobweb were the same height now, and they head-butted. Together, Mary and her team approached Bugsy. The young leader smiled at her and her Ivysaur. "I love it when Pokemon bust out of their cocoons in my gym. Your Ivysaur is impressive. So impressive I want to battle you with my auxiliary team to give it a fair chance. Is that okay with you?" "Whatever thou wishes, I do accept," Mary agreed. "Awesome!" Bugsy switched out his Pokeballs. "Let's go, Sunflora! Barbossa, your turn!" Barbossa used Ember, but Sunflora took it like a champion. It hit Barbossa pretty hard after using Ingrain to restore its health every turn. Mary couldn't let her Numel stay in, so she switched out with Rubix. Rubix used Air Slash and took it down to red health, but Ingrain restored it more. Rubix moved quickly, and this time, Air Slash took it out. Grottle came in next, and Mary looked at Rubix, who nodded. He was staying in. 1 Air Slash was all it took, and the last Pokemon was a Cacnea. Bugsy had wanted to battle Cobweb, but there was no need to switch. Rubix nodded to Mary again, so she let him finish off the battle. Bugsy was in awe of her Togekiss, and Mary ran forward and hugged him. This time there was no hesitation before he rubbed his head against her cheek. Bugsy smiled and approached them. "All you needed was a Togekiss, and you beat my entire team. If we ever battle again, I'm changing tactics. You've definitely earned the Hive badge." He handed her the second badge she needed, and she pinned it to her cloak. "Your next stop should be Goldenrod City, so you'll have to travel through Ilex Forest. Be careful in there, it's pretty dangerous, especially at night." "Thank you. We'll keep our senses heightened," Mary promised. Mary healed her Pokemon at the center, gathered some more supplies, and headed for Ilex Forest's gate. As she was entering, she bumped into a young man, and he spun on her. Mary groaned, having not wanted to run into this boy again. Ice crossed his arms. "Did you get a badge too?" he scoffed. "I have 2. She showed them off, and he narrowed his eyes. "You got Faulkner's? I don't even have his yet. I'll battle you for it," he sneered. "I earned this badge, thou shalt not have it," she replied, trying to move around him, but he stopped her. "That wasn't a request." He pulled a Pokeball from his belt. "Wobbuffet, get him!" "Barbossa, stand aside." Mary wanted to send in Rubix, but Barbossa, who'd been walking with her, was forced onto the field. "Barbossa? Don't you know anything? Wobbuffet's Shadow Tag makes it impossible to switch Pokemon. Your Numel is stuck." "Curses!" Mary muttered. Barbossa looked a little afraid, and Mary was too. "Wobbuffet was a problem the last time I was here. It bounces attacks back at double the power, so I need to whittle it down slowly and use potions in between." She had her strategy. "Barbossa, we can do this together. Trust me and do as I say." He looked back and gave her a nod. "Ember!" "Sucker," Ice chuckled. "Mirror Coat." The tiny bit of damage Barbossa did blasted back at him and pushed him into yellow health. Mary healed, which made Wobbuffet unable to counterattack. Mary had Barbossa use focus energy in order to raise his critical hit chances. Wobbuffet used Destiny Bond, which meant if he knocked out Wobbuffet, Barbossa would go with it. Mary wasted a turn by having him use focus energy again to shake off the Destiny Bond. Then she had him attack with Ember. She interchanged healing and Ember, all the while encouraging her Numel to stay strong. Ice was so confident in his strategy of blasting counter energy that he didn't notice his Wobbuffet was in red health. Mary saw her opening when he used Safeguard. "Ember!" she commanded. Barbossa blew a powerful flame and knocked out the Wobbuffet. Ice looked furious. "Heracross, squash this brat!" he shouted. "Barbossa, switch!" Barbossa barked at her to stay in. "Okay then, Ember!" It came off at critical power. Ice shouted for Horn Attack, and Barbossa felt the impact. "I cannot let thee stay in. Come back, Barbossa. Rubix, face thy old foe." Rubix burst in and glared at Heracross, who smirked. Mary called for Air Slash, but Heracross used Endure and hung on. The next turn brought about his end. The last Pokemon was a Vigoroth, and Rubix called to let him stay. Aura Sphere blasted from his mouth and knocked out the foe. Ice grumbled as he had to retreat to the Pokemon Center. Mary healed up her team and smooched Barbossa for a well-earned victory. They stepped into Ilex Forest and ended up catching a Sneasel named Lazarus. As they walked, a Pokemon attacked them from behind, but Mary was ready for it. Specially selected for Mary Sanderson. You may catch this Houndoom and use it legally. "All right, Houndoom, you're mine," Mary said. She had Hercules weaken it, and she threw the fastball that Kurt gave her. Click. "All right, Bones, welcome to my team." After sending Bones to the meadow, Mary ran into a young carpenter needing help catching his lost Farfetch'd. She managed to wrangle them and was given the HM for cut in return, which she taught to Hercules. As she traversed the forest, she ran into a woman wearing a kimono who was lost. Hercules saw the way out with her psychic powers and pointed in the right direction. "Your Pokemon is very smart," she said. "Thank thee. Wouldst thou like to journey with us to the end?" she asked. "I would, thank you," she replied, and they walked the rest of the way together. And now, previously on episode 3. Mary and the woman wearing the kimono, whose name turned out to be Sakura, walked the rest of Ilex Forest together with Hercules leading the way. Once they made it to the other side, Sakura said goodbye, and Mary continued up the road. She came upon a daycare center for Pokemon, and Ethan was tending to some of the Pokemon there. He looked up from his work and spotted Mary. "Hey, Mary! Long time no see!" He beamed and hurried over to her. "How's your journey been going?" "Fairly well so far," she replied. "I've earned 2 badges thus far and caught many Pokemon." "I see that. Your Drowsy looks really healthy and strong." Hercules crossed her arms pridefully and smirked. "She can be a bit of a handful sometimes, but she is a good girl." Mary smiled and patted Hercules' head. "Well, if you ever feel like having someone help raise your Pokemon, you can leave 2 of them here with me and my grandparents. I'm helping them out for a couple of months, so I'll be around if you want to leave anyone." "Thank thee, Ethan, but I prefer to raise my Pokemon myself," Mary politely declined. "I had a feeling you'd say that," he winked at her. "Well, if you keep following this road, you'll reach Goldenrod by nightfall. Be careful out there, Mary." "I will be. Goodbye for now," Mary said, then went on her way. She battled a few trainers along the route, and, as Ethan said, she made it to Goldenrod City as the sun was setting. She explored for a while and ended up winning a contest at the radio station. The gym leader, Whitney, had been trying to win too, and after seeing how smart Mary was, she asked her to come fight at the gym ASAP. Mary settled into the Pokemon Center and let her team out of their Pokeballs. They all settled into their sleeping areas, and she watched Cobweb Jr. and Barbossa cuddling together. Silently, she hoped they'd never be separated. The next day, they walked into the gym and started their battles with the gym trainers. Mary was doing great until one girl sent in a shaman. Barbossa was on a hot streak. He was whittling down the mythical Pokemon, and his confidence was burning bright. Mary saw Shaman boosting its attack and special attack and wanted to switch. "Barbossa, come back!" she ordered, but he stomped his feet and gave her a hard stare. He wanted to stay in. "Buddy, I do not like this situation. Let Rubix take over." He stomped his feet again and nodded to her. "If thou art certain, I will let thee fight." He turned his attention back to the fight. "Use Ember!" Barbossa prepared to use his fire attack when Magical Leaf sliced into him first. Regret washed through his eyes, and all the color drained from Mary's face as they locked gazes. Barbossa fell in a lifeless heap. Mary let out a cry for her Numal, but Cobweb Jr. wailed in sorrow. He ran to Barbossa's side and nudged him with his head, desperately trying to get him to headbutt back. Mary could not stop herself from crying as she heard Cobweb moaning for his dead friend. Suddenly, her Pokeball opened itself, and an angry Rubix burst onto the field and knocked out the shaman, ending the battle. Mary rushed over and cradled Barbossa in her arms as Cobweb nestled next to him, and Rubix stood next to Cobweb. "I should have made thee switch out," Mary muttered. "I'm so sorry, Barbossa. I have no items to brew a potion for thee. I cannot bring thee back as much as I want to. My sweet boy." It broke her heart as badly as it had when Icy had been slain in the Kanto region. She didn't want to say goodbye, but more so she didn't want Cobweb Jr. to say goodbye to his best friend. Yet she had no choice, so she went to return his body to the ball, but Rubix lifted the fallen Numal onto his back. He looked very sad as he flew next to Mary and Cobweb as they walked back to the Pokemon Center. Mary returned Barbossa to his ball and buried him in the graves of the PC. She had to choose a replacement, and in the end, she chose Flare. Mary decided to wait until the next day to go back to the gym. She had to train Flare for a while. As soon as she let her out of the ball, Flare tackled Mary and started licking her, tail wagging 1,000,000 miles an hour. Normally, this wouldn't be too bad if her Arcanine wasn't taller than she was and didn't weigh 350 pounds. Flare's loving tackle knocked the wind right out of her trainer, and Mary felt like she was never getting up again until she finally coaxed Flare off of her. Flare then started inspecting her new teammates. She sniffed Ka and gave him a lick on the face. She laid down in front of Hercules for a second as the psychic type got a read on her. She hopped up and pawed lovingly at October, who hugged the fluffy dog with a smile. Rubix and Flare sniffed at each other before Flare licked him over and over, panting after soaking the flying type. Rubix looked confused as he started preening. Finally, Flare walked over to Cobweb Jr., and he snubbed her gesture of friendship. He was too broken up to look at her, and Flare whined despondently. Mary walked between them and patted them both gently. "Flare, thou must understand. Cobweb has just lost his best friend. He is grieving. It is nothing against thee, but he is sad. He will warm up to thee in time," she assured her Arcanine, then turned to Cobweb Jr. "Junior, I will miss him too. I know how close the two of you were, but he will be watching over us, and if I can find a way, I shall return him to you. I promise. Do not close thyself off from your friends or me, please." Cobweb Jr. huddled himself into Mary's arms, and they both cried together. She hugged him as tightly as she could. After she managed to compose herself, she took Flare out to the route to train. It was like herding cats to get Flare to concentrate, but Mary's patience had been forged in the fires of having Sarah for a little sister. Eventually, Flare was training well and growing stronger. Cobweb Jr. stayed sitting by Mary through the entire endeavor, watching Flare battle wild Pokemon. Rubix and the others had her back when a stronger opponent gave her trouble. It took all day into the night for Flare to get caught up with her teammates, but she did it. Back in their room at the Pokemon Center, Mary watched as the sleeping situation changed a bit. October laid on the rug by the bed as always, but Flare decided to curl up next to him. Hercules, instead of sleeping in the window, snuggled up against Flare's back, her fur acting as a warm pillow. Ka still remained in the bathtub, and Cobweb curled up next to Mary on the bed. As she started to settle in, she felt someone else in bed with her and Cobweb. Rubix nested at the foot of the bed. The loss of Barbossa had hit everyone hard, but somehow it brought everybody closer together. The gym trainers in Goldenrod Gym didn't stand a chance now. No one stood in their way, and Flare really carried her weight. Mary was proud of her and everyone else for their efforts. Finally, they made it to the gym leader. Whitney clapped excitedly when she saw her. "I was hoping to see you sooner, but I heard one of my girls whipped your Numal into submission, so it's no wonder it took so long," she said. Mary had to hold Cobweb Jr. back, and she took a deep breath. "It was a tragic loss, but his sacrifice will not be in vain. I will walk out of here victorious, wearing thy badge," Mary challenged her. "We'll see about that. You might know a lot about Pokemon, but we'll see how good your battling is." She tossed out her first Pokemon, Persian. "Ka, attack with Water Pulse! Fake out, Persian!" Whitney ordered. Ka was hit by Persian's attack so hard he flinched and couldn't move. Mary was patient where Ka was not. He was angry that such a dirty trick had been pulled over on him. Mary yelled at him to remain calm and to focus. His next water pulse hit at such power it caused confusion status on Persian. Persian hid itself from the confused status, and Ka finished off the feline with another water pulse. Whitney sent in her second Pokemon, Ambipom. Ka was to keep battling. Mary called for water pulse as Ambipom wrapped its tails around Ka to use Tickle and lower his stats. Ka blasted water in the Ambipom's face and it took it down to yellow health. Whitney chose to heal, so Ka got a free turn to hit with water pulse and caused confusion in the Ambipom. Ambipom pulled off a move that plunged Ka into red, so both trainers healed. Ambipom was so confused that it hit itself twice, and Ka took it down with a couple more blows. Whitney lost and started crying as Mary cheered and rushed for Ka, who was swimming in the small pond. For the first time, he grinned and wrapped his tail around Mary's back as she gave him a hug. He had just defeated a gym leader all by himself. Whitney did not stop whining about losing for another several minutes as Mary waited. She finally approached the gym leader and exhaled. Whining about loss will not change the outcome. From my travels, gym leaders are meant to uphold standards of dignity and professionalism. You are demonstrating neither right now. What do you know? Whitney huffed. I know what it takes to raise legendary Pokemon, and beyond that, what it means to be a proper trainer. My Pokemon love me and I them. Your Pokemon clearly love thee as well, win or lose, and that's all that should matter, Mary said. Whitney looked at her two Pokemon and smiled at them. She stood up and handed Mary a badge. Take the plain badge, she said, and Mary pinned it to her cloak. You're right. My Pokemon mean more to me than any victories. As they should. Mary patted her shoulder, then left. She healed her Pokemon at the center, then headed up the next route towards the national park. In the park, she caught a Baneri named Jessica. Route 36, she caught Magnus the Magnezone, and then ran into a Magikarp blocking the path that she had caught and named Namora. On Route 37, she caught Ginger the Budew before entering Ecruteak City. She started exploring and found a place called the Burn Tower. Inside, she peered into the floor and saw 3 large Pokemon. One of them was Suicune. As she was staring, a man walked up to her and scared her half to death. Apologies for startling you, madam, but I could not help noticing you were staring at Suicune. Magnificent creature. I know. I once owned one, Mary said, and the man nearly dropped from shock. Excuse me? You owned Suicune? I have been searching for it for years, and you tell me you've owned it? Then what on earth are you waiting for? Get down there and free it so we may both have a shot at claiming it, he babbled. But know this, I, Eugene, will be the one to capture it this time. You are a bit much to take, Mary said, walking past him. Then she growled, Oh, and speaking of too much to take, not you again, I snarled at her. Don't tell me. You think you're going to go down there and meet the legendary Pokemon? Well, that's what that strange man yelled at me to do, Mary said. No way, you're not going down there before me. Ice didn't hesitate. Exeggutor! Oh, I am familiar with this Pokemon, Mary chuckled. She thought of Nutcase for a moment. Flare, get ready to fight. Her Arcanine burst in and howled. Exeggutor used Confusion, and Flare retaliated with a much more powerful Fire Fang attack. Exeggutor put her to sleep with hypnosis, and Flare took one blow before Mary healed her. Exeggutor attacked again, and Flare's eyes snapped open. She attacked with Fire Fang and knocked it out. Lumineon was his next Pokemon, and Cobweb Jr. came into fight. He unleashed a Razor Leaf attack that was backed up by aggression from the loss of Barbossa. It almost knocked out the foe. The next Razor Leaf knocked out Lumineon after it smacked Cobweb with Gust. Heracross came in and Rubix was sent into battle. It got in a hit, then used Endure to survive Rubix's Air Slash. It only saved him for one turn because Rubix was too fast. The last Pokemon was Banette, and it fell to Rubix in 2 hits. Ice was so angry he didn't even say a word as he slammed his shoulder into Mary, storming past her to the exit. Mary ran into a wild Oddish that had gotten lost in the tower, caught her, and named her Mary Jane. Mary used the rickety ladder to get to the basement area. When she walked towards the 3 beasts, Entei, Raikou, and Suicune, Mary could tell they weren't who they appeared to be as they ran off. The Suicune shared eye contact with her, and Mary sensed this was an illusion she would have to break one day. Yusin had followed her down and saw Suicune dash off. "It most definitely remembers you," he said, "but I'll make it forget and become my ally in the end. Mark my words, we will meet again, young lady." He hastily chased after the false Suicune. Mary left the burned tower, wondering who it was, as it was not her Sarah. She sat down at the pond and decided to fish for an encounter. What she ended up doing instead was sending Ka to rescue a wild Shinx who was thrashing in the water. Mary dried it off with her cloak when Ka brought him over, and in the end, Shinx joined her team and was named Lion-O. She carried him back to the Pokemon Center and put him in the meadow for some rest. Tomorrow, she needed to do some training for the next gym. And now, previously on episode 4. Mary and her team did some exercise and training to boost their strength and confidence before deciding to take on the 4th gym. Mary did not want to lose another Pokemon like she had Barbossa. Cobweb Jr. was actively taking on the role of training coach. Clearly, he felt the same way as his trainer. Everyone was feeling good by the time they stepped up in front of Ecruteak City Gym. Mary nodded to her team as she returned them to their Pokeballs. She walked in and sensed immense power from this place, her magic recharging. Thanks to this, she was able to sniff her way through the darkening gym. Each gym trainer was defeated, and she finally walked up to Morty. "Takes a good deal of power to reach me. I'm impressed," he said. "Sadly, my ghost-type Pokemon are all on a spiritual rest, so I'm afraid you must face my auxiliary team instead. If that doesn't suit you, come back tomorrow." "It suits me fine," Mary said. All she wanted was the badge. In order to get back to her sisters before something bad happened, Mary didn't care what she had to fight. "Then we shall begin," he said, and called out his first Pokemon. Clefable was bulky to be sure, but Mary knew how to wear down such defensive walls. She sent in Hercules to use poison gas, and the attack landed. Now, at the end of every turn, Clefable's health would drain a little more. Hercules did her job, so Mary switched her out with October as Clefable boosted its evasive stats. This boost caused October to miss his Rock Smash, but the poison was working just fine. Clefable used Double Slap on October, but the Rock and Steel Behemoth laughed it off as if he felt nothing. At such close range, his Rock Smash hit that time and dealt a massive blow. Morty healed Clefable, but October came in for another powerful blow, knocking it right down to where it was before. The poison drained its health a little further. Clefable tried to use Double Slap again, but October brushed her off. His attack missed. Clefable got its revenge before it was knocked out by the poison by using Metronome, which turned into Thunderwave and paralyzed October. As Relicanth came in, Mary switched into Cobweb Jr., who was ready for some action. Relicanth used Harden to boost his defense stats, but his health was cut down by nearly half when Razor Leaf sliced into him. Cobweb was so fast he pulled off another Razor Leaf, which left the fish with 1 health point left. He slammed Cobweb Jr. with the Rock Tomb, but a storm of leaves blew the rocks away and his Razor Leaf ended the Relicanth. Scorpy was next, so Mary swapped into Flare, whose tail wagged rapidly. She was ready for this. 1 Fire Fang knocked out the bug type and Flare woofed proudly. Wigglytuff was the last opponent. Mary remembered this thing had an ability to infatuate Pokemon of the opposite gender, and she could smell that this one was female. Flare kept on battling since she was immune to the ability. It took a few exchanged blows, but Flare came out on top and Mary won the battle. She hugged Hercules first, then October, who lifted her up in a big squeeze. Then she hugged and kissed Cobweb, but before she could hug Flare, she was tackled to the ground and licked all over. Mary felt the wind politely exit her lungs once more, but she rubbed Flare's shaggy head happily. Once she pushed her Arcanine off of her, Morty helped her to her feet. "Your team put up quite the battle, I must say," he said proudly. "Very few can defeat my auxiliary team. The Fog Badge is yours." He handed her the 4th badge she needed. Halfway there. "Your next stop will be Olivine City to the west. Just follow the route, and you'll be there by nightfall." "Thank thee. We shall set off soon," Mary replied. They took a quick break at the Pokemon Center for some rest and food. Mary had taken to preparing her own special Pokemon food for the team. She'd actually bought a cookbook from the Goldenrod department store. Her team was wild about the stuff, and it even brought a big smile out of Rubik's. He finished his bowl, then brought it over to Mary for seconds. She filled his dish, and he pressed his forehead against hers in thanks. She was glad to see him finally opening up. Flare and October smiled at each other after every few bites. Hercules and Ka meditated together after they emptied their bowls. Cobweb Jr. scooted his bowl over beside Rubik's, plopped down, and continued eating. Rubik's looked at him in surprise. Everyone was starting to form bonds and become a whole team now. Barbossa, we mourn thy loss, but I know 'tis thine spirit bringing this little family closer together. We'll make you proud, she said quietly. After everything was packed up or returned to the Pokemon Center's kitchen, Mary set off with Hercules at her side. As she was starting to go towards the next route, she got a sniff of something foul and heard a commotion nearby. She exchanged a look with her Drowsy and started to walk for the route, but Hercules insisted they check out the trouble. Mary knew what it was before they even entered the dance theater. A Team Rocket grunt was causing a ruckus. He was more than a little intoxicated, but he was yelling at the dancer, a young lady who bore a striking resemblance to Sakura, that he'd beat her in a dance-off and take her Pokemon. With a deep exhale, Mary walked up behind him and cleared her throat. Now, I know it isn't my business, but you've had a bit too much to drink today. Leave the nice girl alone and be on the way before this gets ugly, she said. The grunt turned to her. It already has. You showed up, kid, and you're no looker. He laughed, practically sloshing as he walked towards her. Mary, who'd been called many an ugly thing in the past, rolled her eyes. I'll ask thee one final time. Leave now, and this needn't grow any worse. You trying to pick a fight with me? I think you're trying to pick a fight with me, he snarled, pulling a Pokeball from his belt. Blaziken, show this punk who she's messing with. Hercules, use confusion, Mary said half-heartedly. Hercules knocked out the firefighting type before it finished materializing from its ball. The grunt looked stunned. Now do you want to try that again? He ran off as if he was on fire. Hercules and Mary crossed their arms at the same time and smirked. That's what I thought. Thank you, miss, said the dancer. You put that grunt in his place faster than any trainer ever battled Team Rocket. I've dealt with them many a time before, Mary replied. Tell me, are you related to a girl named Sakura? Yes, she's my sister. Oh, that means you're Mary. I'm Satsuki. She and Mary shook hands. Thank you for getting Sakura to safety in Ilex Forest, and thanks for getting me out of this jam, too. Hercules insisted we stop by before going on our way to Olivine City. She was also the one who guided us out of the forest. Mary gave all the credit to her Drowsy. Satsuki knelt down and patted Hercules on the head lovingly. Thank you, too, Hercules, she said, and Hercules blushed. If you're heading to Olivine City, you might want to take this with you. If you have a water type, they'll benefit from it. She gave Mary the HM for Surf. Thank you kindly. That will help us out, Mary said. She took a moment with Satsuki to teach the move to Ka. Try to stay out of trouble, huh? Count on it, Satsuki replied, and Mary departed. She had been put a bit behind schedule, but she still felt they could make the journey to Olivine before it got too dark. She started walking on Route 38 to find another new friend when she saw a twinkle from above as the sun was starting to set. It was beautiful. It was the first star of the night, and it was getting closer. Mary ran out of the way as a falling star slammed into the ground. She and Hercules had their arms wrapped around each other, both wide-eyed. They cautiously approached the crater, and what they saw made them both gasp. A tiny Pokemon with a star-shaped head and flowing tails levitated out of the crater. It looked at both of them and cocked its head. Mary slowly approached it, keeping herself crouched a bit and a gentle smile on her face. Hello there, little one. Art thou lost? Can I help? Mary was pushed back by a psychic blast. Okay, thou art a powerful little thing. Her Pokedex went off loudly. Jirachi, a psychic and steel type. This Pokemon is the stuff of myths and is said to come to Earth in a comet every 1,000 years. Mary, this is your encounter. Catch it! Another legendary, huh? Mary took a deep breath and calmed herself. Let's see if I still have the skill to catch one. Hercules, help me out! Hercules stepped up to the plate and started exchanging psychic blows with the mythical Pokemon. They worked hard, wearing each other down. Jirachi was so disheveled he was having a hard time landing moves, and he was having a harder time than Hercules was. At one point, none of his moves were hitting, and he looked like he was ready to cry from the frustration. Mary saw his distress and ordered Hercules to use a combination move. Hercules landed a critical hit cut attack, then used hypnosis to put him to sleep. Jirachi floated to the ground, and Mary took the opportunity. Her first ball broke. Her second and third Pokeball did too. Even asleep, this Pokemon's power was fending off her advances. Mary took her fourth Pokeball, clutched it for a moment, then tossed with all her might. 1 shake. 2 shakes. 3 shakes. Click! Jirachi has been registered to your Pokedex, beeped her pocket guide. It seems your reputation precedes you, Mary. The legend trainer continues to show her skills. Legend trainer? She asked it as she picked up the Pokeball. It is the title given to you by your previous proctor. Did my sisters receive titles? Not that I am aware of, it replied. Your prowess was marked higher than theirs, but I can search the databanks to see if they were named as well. I would like that, Mary said, and placed her Pokedex back in her bag. She sat down and let out her 5 other Pokemon before opening Jirachi's ball. She picked up the sleeping mythical creature and cradled him in her arms. Her entire team looked on in awe. They knew who it was she was holding. Jirachi opened his eyes a few moments later and looked at the 6 Pokemon. He was startled, then looked up at Mary, who smiled at him. He calmed almost instantly. Hello. I hope you're not disappointed in who you've been caught by, she told him, and he shook his head. I'd like to give thee a name, if that's all right. All of my friends have them. He nodded. Let's see. You look like a Bilious to me. I could call you Billy for short, she suggested, and he floated up out of her arms, spun happily, and grinned. Then Bilious it will be. It's good to meet you, Billy. It is good to meet you, too, Billy replied, and Mary gasped. Didst thou just speak? She exclaimed. Was that wrong? He asked with a cock of his head. No, I have just never heard a Pokemon speak before. Is it because you're a psychic type? She asked him. I don't know. I just know I can talk to Mary now. Billy grinned and did a few backflips. He hovered in front of the 6 Pokemon. And these are Rubik's, October, Hercules, Cobweb Jr., and Flare. These are Mary's friends. And are my friends now. Yay, friends! Yay, Mary! Yay, he was trying to remember his own name. Billy. Yay for Billy! Listen, Billy, I cannot keep more than 6 Pokemon in my team at a time, but there is no harm in having you travel along with us if you don't fight. Would you like that, or do you want to meet my other Pokemon in the meadow I was given? Billy thought for a bit. Go meet other friends, then travel with Mary later. So, that's what they did. Mary went back to Ecruteak and put Bilious in the PC, where he quickly made friends with other Pokemon. They decided to sleep for the night, Billy back with them for the stay before he went back to the meadow in the morning, and Mary set off once more. She ran into the Safari Zone warden, and he recognized Rubik's. Rubik's recognized him too, and this was the first time Mary saw her Togekiss show genuine excitement and pure affection for someone. The warden promised to let them know when the Safari Zone was open again, so Rubik's could go back home. This thought almost made Mary sad, but she knew where he had come from. Over on the next route, they caught Naveen the Lombre before reaching Olivine City. When Mary went to the gym, she was told the leader was at the lighthouse caring for a sick Pokemon. Mary had experience helping with sickness, so she thought maybe she could lend a hand. She went to the lighthouse and met up with Jasmine there. The Pokemon in the lighthouse was an Ampharos, which made Mary all the more invested in helping cure its illness. She had remembered her own Ampharos, named Lambchop, from the Kanto region. When Mary told Jasmine she knew that Ampharos required special care, Jasmine told her the apothecary in Cheyennewood City might be able to whip up something for them, so Mary set off immediately. She wasn't hesitating, as she wanted to do right by this Pokemon in honor of Lambchop. As they reached the waters of Olivine, Mary managed to make a raft for herself out of a large piece of driftwood. Ka, a rope in his mouth pulled her along the water. In the harbor, they caught Rarity, the Milotic. On the way to Cheyenne Wood, they caught Springlock the Spoink and Bessie the Miltank. When they landed at Cheyenne Wood, Mary and her team healed up at the Pokemon Center. As she was feeding her team their lunch, a Parasect came over, looking hungry. He poked Mary's side with his claw and looked up longingly at her. She smiled at him. "Hello, little fella. Are you hungry?" she asked and set a napkin full of Pokemon food on the ground for him. "Here you go." Parasect started happily gobbling down the food when a young man ran over. "Oh, geez, Shucky, I was worried sick about you. I thought that boy came back and stole you too," his trainer scolded. Parasect, called Shucky, turned around and looked ashamed. "Sorry, miss. Shucky shouldn't have bothered you." "No bother at all," Mary replied. "Did you say someone stole your Pokemon?" "Yeah, this punk kid in baggy clothes. He had the word ice shaved in his hair." Mary growled at the description. "Oh, I'm familiar with him. I have fought him off plenty of times. I've been trying to keep Shucky close by, but I'm so scared he's going to come back for him, too. I don't know what to do." They both watched Shucky eat his food, then walked over to the other Pokemon and introduced himself. Everyone was welcoming to him. Flare even licked him. "He certainly seems to like your Pokemon." "That he does." "I know this sounds crazy, but, would you take care of Shucky for a while?" the trainer asked. Mary raised an eyebrow. "Look, he's already getting along with them, and you said you've been able to fight the guy off. My Parasect has a rare ability, and I'm afraid that guy will come back for him. Just keep him for a while until I know he's gone for sure. Please?" Mary thought for a moment and watched the 7 of them getting along. "All right, I'll take him." Shucky shared a long, sad goodbye with his trainer before settling in with his new friends. Mary went to the apothecary after everyone was squared away. She told him exactly what was needed, and the pharmacist said he would have it ready in a day. Mary decided to stay in Cheyenne Wood to face their gym, but she wanted to train a little bit first. As she started to do so, a wild Kadabra challenged them to a fight, so she caught Mysterio. Mary went down to the beach to train, and instead she found the Suicune that was an illusion. It made eye contact with her, then ran off. "I knew Suicune would be where you are," Eugene said. "It wants to be reclaimed by you, but I must catch it. I'll battle you for the honor. Perhaps I'll prove myself, and it will choose me." Mary, unsurprised by much at this point, obliged. She and her team took Eugene down, but it wasn't easy. His Magneton was the biggest problem with its Thunderwave and Supersonic combination. Eventually, Flare and October took care of it. His Prinplup was pretty easy prey for Cobweb Jr., but the mythical Manaphy he owned led to a lot of back and forth between the two. After a while, Cobweb overtook it. Eugene was impressed with her battle prowess and vowed they would meet again. As Mary started training her team, Hercules began to glow. She beamed as her Pokemon evolved. Hypno has been registered to your Pokedex. And now... Previously on episode 5. Mary's team was trained up and ready to go. She walked into Cheyenne Wood City Gym and took out the 3 gym trainers with ease. She noticed the gym leader was oblivious to everything happening around him while the waterfall pounded down on his head. Mary tried to figure out a way to stop it when Hercules found a bunch of gears and a button atop one of the platforms. Mary walked over and pressed the button her Hypno was indicating. The waterfall closed up and the gym leader broke from his trance. "Good work, Herc!" Mary complimented her Pokemon, and they ran down to the stairs. When they came face to face with the gym leader, he was furious. "How dare you interrupt my training? I was in a perfect state of mind when you shut off my waterfall," he declared. "Apologies, but I had called your name several times, and that was the only way I could get thy attention," Mary panicked. "Oh, so you're a trainer looking for a battle," he realized. "Yes, sir," Mary gulped. "Well, in that case, I'm Chuck. My fighting types are away at a special training camp, so I'll have to use my auxiliary team. But don't underestimate them. They've been trained as hard as my others," he said. "I'm ready when you are," Mary said, and the battle began. Chuck sent in his first Pokemon, Dunsparce. Mary sent in Hercules to get in her first fight as a Hypno. Hercules opened with Psybeam, and Dunsparce countered with Pursuit, which was super effective but only powerful when a Pokemon was in the process of switching out. Because of this, Mary knew it was too dangerous to try that, so Hercules ended up exchanging blows with the Serpent. Eventually, and after both trainers healed, Hercules came out on top. His second and last Pokemon was Octillery. Hercules was worn out, so Mary switched into Cobweb Jr. Jr. was smacked by Bullet Seed, which only made him scoff before using Razor Leaf, nearly halving the foe's health. A Razor Leaf and Leech Seed combination knocked out the Octillery, and Mary was victorious. She hugged Hercules and smooched Cobweb, who both blushed. Chuck walked over, shook her hand, and handed over the Storm Badge. Mary needed 3 more badges. As she was leaving, a woman told her she saw the battle from outside the windows and gifted her the HM for Fly, thinking Mary could make better use of it. She watched as the disc materialized in her broom, and Mary grinned. When she touched the handle to Rubik's nose, he learned the move Fly. Now she had to wait for that medicine for Ampharos. In the Pokemon Center that night, she fed her team their food, and when she went to bed, she felt Rubik's lay his head down on her side while he dozed next to Cobweb for the very first time. Mary was so happy her Togekiss was feeling closer to everyone, but her stomach turned sour when she thought about the Safari Zone Warden's upcoming call. Rubik's would be going home. She knew this would happen eventually, since that was where he came from initially. The professor was only looking after them for a bit, and in turn, so was she. Mary brushed his feathers with her fingers before finally falling asleep. When the call came for the medicine, Mary hurriedly picked it up and mounted her broom. She flew off for Olivine City, Rubik's flying by her side. She hadn't done this since her journey in the Kanto region, and suddenly she missed Broomy. She also missed Brutus, who was probably worried sick about her. But as Rubik's glided next to her, those worries vanished ever so slightly. They landed atop the lighthouse and dashed inside to present Jasmine with the medicine. Jasmine fed it to Ampharos, and the Pokemon sprang back to health. "Thank you so much for your help, Mary. I don't know what might have happened if you hadn't been here," Jasmine said gratefully. "It was no bother. I had an Ampharos myself once, like I told you, so I knew I could lend a hand. Besides, my sweet Lambchop never would have forgiven me had I let one of her kin remain ill," Mary said with a laugh. "All the same, I'm ready for that gym battle when you are," Jasmine said. "I'll be happy to walk over with you." So that's what they did. Jasmine and Mary entered the gym together, and Jasmine decided to challenge her with Pokemon she's had since childhood. Mary was honored to fight this team. Jasmine's Venonat fell at the hands of Hercules, and then so did her Swinub. For the Bagon, Mary switched into Ka, whose Ice Fang ended the battle. Jasmine and Mary shook hands, then shared a hug. "You really know how to raise Pokemon properly. I can tell you care deeply about them, and they feel the same for you. I don't think I've met a trainer with a better knack for knowing what a Pokemon needs than you," Jasmine said. "I do my best," Mary said, "and they seem to like me well enough." "Don't sell yourself short. You're a great trainer. So go show the world how great you are and become the champion." Mary left the gym and her Pokegear rang. It was Warden Boba. The Safari Zone was fully repaired from the damages done by Rubik's, Heracross, and Dusclops, and it had opened again. He invited Mary to come to the grand opening so Rubik's could see everything. Mary could tell her Togekiss was itching to get back home, so they flew off for Cheyennewood City, where the gate was located. On the waters of the route, she caught Sniffles the Swinub, and in the cliffside cave, Mary caught Pepe Le Pew the Stunky. When they reached the Safari Zone and Mary paid her entry, she caught Gladstone the Golduck and Pucker the Goldeen. As she tried to catch a few other Pokemon, Rubik's flew around sniffing everything and happily chirping as he ran into old friends. Dusclops was back and healthier than ever. He was happy to see Rubik's, and the pair played for a while. Mary sat down on a rock and started watching him. She let her Pokemon out for some exercise, but Cobweb Jr. stayed plopped down by her side. Rubik's eventually found the old cliff and nest that he called home, cozying up in the bed he'd made all that time ago. He fell asleep almost immediately. Mary felt her gut tie itself up, but Jasmine's words echoed in her mind. "I don't think I've met a trainer with a better knack for knowing what a Pokemon needs than you." Mary sat for a while longer before taking Rubik's Pokeball from her bag, hopping on her broom to fly up to the cliff, and she set the ball next to him. "You're home at last, Rubik's. I know that's why you've been so shy since we met." why you were so aggressive with your attacks, and why fighting Heracross meant so much. You wanted to pay him back for wrecking the place you called home. You were probably just trying to protect your friends. You might have aggravated Heracross at the lab, but it was retaliation. You weren't the bully I thought you were. I have grown to love thee so much, but I know that this is where you belong. Keep this place safe." She gave his feathers one more ruffle. "I'll never forget you." Mary flew back down, returned her 5 remaining Pokemon to their balls. All of them looked confused, and left the safari zone. Rubix remained in his nest. They spent the night at the Pokemon Center. Cobweb Jr. pressed closely to her chest, and the others slept right by the bed. Even Ka. October had cried himself to sleep over Rubix's departure from the team. Flare had barely touched her dinner. Ka had coiled into a ball with a dismayed look on his face. Hercules flicked her amulet back and forth, looking downtrodden. Eventually, they all fell asleep. Mary hadn't felt this sad since Broomy left her company at the end of her Kanto journey. But she knew Rubix would be happier with his old friends in his home instead of traveling from place to place. Cobweb Jr. was the saddest of all. He'd clung to Rubix after Barbossa's loss, so he stayed as close to Mary as possible. They huddled together all night long. The next morning, Mary took Billy's ball from the PC, and she added him to the team. Billy was excited to be going on an adventure with Mary and the others now that he had made friends with the other Pokemon. He rode on her shoulder, humming happily as they set off from the Pokemon Center. As they crossed the threshold from the Safari Zone, they heard a loud cry behind them. Mary looked up and gasped as she saw Rubix sailing towards them quickly. He dived down right in front of her and smiled brightly. "Rubix, you didn't have to come say goodbye," she told him. Rubix chirped at her again and stayed put. "Don't you want to get back to Dusclops and the others?" "Billy thinks Rubix does not want to leave Mary," Billy said, and Rubix nodded. "Buddy, I can't stay here with you. I have to complete my trial and get home to Sarah and Winifred," she told him kindly. "So go on back to your friends." He chirped a few times. "Rubix says Mary is his friend, and so is Cobweb Jr., Hercules, Flare, Ka, October, and Billy," Billy said happily. Rubix dug his mouth into his feathers and pulled out his Pokeball. He set it down, then nudged it forward. It rolled onto the toe of Mary's boot. "He isn't leaving. He wants to keep traveling with Mary." "Are you sure?" she asked Togekiss, and Rubix flapped his wings, then tackled her. He started nuzzling her cheek lovingly, and Mary laughed. Everyone popped out of their Pokeballs from the impact. Okay, I get your message." Mary sat up, grabbed the Pokeball, and held it out to Rubix. He poked it with his nose and flew inside. The ball shook 3 times and clicked. "Looks like I caught a Togekiss." Everyone cheered. Mary and her full team, plus Billy, who insisted on staying, flew back to Ecruteak City in order to cross over to Mahogany Town where the 7th gym was. Mary ran into a hiker at Mount Mortar who gave her the HM for strength. Inside the mountain's cave, she caught an Apom that she named Sam. Over on the next route, she ran into the false Suicune again and had to endure another speech from Eugene before she caught Vixie the Ninetails. It took until mid-afternoon to reach Mahogany Town, and Mary immediately caught a whiff of something foul in the air. Team Rocket. She fed her Pokemon some lunch, then followed her nose up the route towards the Lake of Rage. As she explored the route, another smell wafted into her senses. It was familiar. As she stopped walking for a minute, a roar rang out from behind her and she was snatched up. Mary screeched as she fell backwards right onto the tummy of a very ecstatic Brutus! She exclaimed as her Charizard hugged her over and over again. What art thou doing here?" She hugged her boy tightly, and he licked her face again and again. Her Pokedex beeped. "When you were brought here, your 2 Pokemon, Charizard and Mightyena, were put into a stasis as well. They were set free in this region, but would only wake if you happened to find them. Their powers have been weakened to measure out with the wild Pokemon in their areas. Brutus is your encounter, and as such, has been returned to your team," it explained. "And Cabby, where is she?" Mary asked the box. "Unclear. But regardless of whether you find her or not, she will wake in purgatory when your journey is over, it answered. Thank goodness. Mary breathed a sigh of relief. Her mighty Inna was safe no matter what. She turned back to Brutus. Buddy, let me introduce you to my new team. Mary sent out her 6 Pokemon, who looked at Brutus in surprise. Everyone, this is my Charizard, Brutus. He traveled with me in the Kanto region. He is a powerful ally and the best friend you could ever ask for. Please welcome him to our team. Billy was the first to hover over to Brutus. Brutus is very strong and nice. It is nice to meet Brutus. Yay for Brutus! Her Charizard grinned at the Jirachi. Everyone quickly warmed up to Brutus, but Rubix was ever so slightly jealous. He poked at him a few times, but Mary straightened everything out. She explained to Brutus that right now she was traveling with these Pokemon, and she didn't feel right about benching anyone, so he agreed to go to the meadow until she called on him. Mary had a few trainers interrupt her search for Team Rocket, and after one battle, Cobweb Jr. began to glow. Mary gasped as his flower bud blossomed, and he grew tall. Venusaur has been registered to your Pokedex, her encyclopedia beeped. Junior, look how big you've grown, Mary exclaimed, rubbing his head, and he grinned. Now, up ahead, she found a crazy sight at the Lake of Rage. A shiny Apom was battling a bunch of fish Pokemon. It looked enraged as it struck repeatedly with its fisted tail. Mary sniffed, and the scent of Team Rocket was all over that poor Pokemon. Ka pulled Mary on her raft over to the Apom, and with Hercules' help, Mary caught the shiny Apom. She hurried back to shore and opened the ball. Apom was going bananas, and Mary finally had to grab her in her arms and hug her to her chest. Easy, easy, little one. I can tell you're hurting. Just calm thyself, and I can help thee, she shouted over the Pokemon's cries. Billy floated over and patted Apom on the head. Calm down, friend. Calm down, he said, exerting a little bit of power from his hand. Apom calmed immediately. Thank you, Billy, Mary exhaled as Apom snuggled closer to her. She stroked it gently as her Pokedex beeped. This Apom was fighting off evolution. It seems it had not met the correct criteria to evolve, but some sort of signal was forcing it. Apom was actually the ace partner of Sarah Sanderson during her Johto journey, and so this one will make a powerful ally for you. Sarah's been here! Mary shouted, scaring Apom. Sorry. She calmed her down again. The Pokedex showed a photo of Sarah with her partner, Allison, the Ambipom. Mary was shocked. Ambipom is the evolved form of Apom. Only when it learns the move Double Hit will this Pokemon evolve, the Pokedex said. Was that what you were doing, Allie? Mary named her then and there. Trying to learn Double Hit? Allie nodded. Well, let's get you back to the meadow and rested before any more training is done, okay? Allie nodded again and snuggled up in her trainer's arms. Billy looked at Allie, then Mary, then, There is a man approaching, he gasped. Billy was right, and Mary recognized him. Lance of the Elite Four, she gasped as he stepped up in front of her. Well, it's Champion Lance now, but I see you recognized me, Lance said. I'm happy I could run into a trainer as adept at calming Pokemon as you. He didn't remember their battle last year. That Apom was in a lot of pain thanks to Team Rocket. They're using a radio signal to force Pokemon to evolve before they're ready. Mary growled lowly. Is that why Allie was so enraged? Yes, and I think I have located their hideout in town, but I need someone's help to bring it down. All of my colleagues are too wrapped up in other duties to help me. After seeing how quickly you rushed to save Apom, I wondered if you wouldn't mind joining me on this quest. Lance proposed a partnership. If it means Team Rocket can't hurt Pokemon like Allie, I'll do whatever you say, she responded. They stormed the Team Rocket hideout together, and Mary caught a Pokemon that was being used as a trap, Lucian, the Pidgeotto. Mary and Lance worked together to defeat the grunts, and she scared a few of them into telling her the passwords to the ringleader's office. Once she was inside, she found who she was expecting to see. Only... Thou art not Giovanni, Mary scowled at him. What? How dare you insinuate such a thing? I am, of course, Giovanni, the leader of Team Rocket, the impostor replied, and Mary huffed. I'd know his foul stench anywhere, and you do not smell a thing like him. You are an impostor. Besides, his voice is much more menacing. Yours is just annoying. Well, that's just mean, the impostor said, and threw off his disguise. You petulant child, you dare insult the mighty Petrol like this? How dare you? I mean, how dare you? I'll show you who you're messing with. Mary couldn't help chuckling at his childish outbursts. No wonder she'd tracked him so easily through the hideout. He was a big baby. His Jigglypuff was felled by Hercules, his Whooper fell to her as well, and finally so did his Grimer. Petrol stared at Mary's Hypno, who lunged at him as Mary barked, and he screeched in fear. Mary and Hercules laughed heartily as he ran away, practically crying from terror. The password to the control room is Hail Giovanni, but you'll never get in. You have to open it with my voice, he shouted before dashing up the stairs. Ooh, that is a problem, Mary puzzled. Then the Murkrow that had been perched next to the desk opened its beak. Hail Giovanni, it said in a perfect imitation of Petrol's voice. Mary and Hercules exchanged a sly look. Come here, Murkrow. Would you like a treat? Mary reached into her bag and grabbed the container of her Pokemon food. She shook a few pellets into her hand. Come on, don't be shy. Murkrow flitted over, landed on her arm, and snacked away. Mary carried Murkrow to the control room where she and Lance had parted ways. Mary asked Murkrow to say the password, and he did so without question. The doors slid open as Lance joined her again. That was a great time hack, thank you kindly, Murkrow, Mary said, giving him one more pellet of food. The Pokemon flew off, feeling quite carefree. Nice work, Mary, Lance said gratefully. Let's get in there and not so fast, said a red-haired woman behind them. Ariana. I haven't seen you since Mount Silver, Lance growled at her. You want to stop us, I gather. Precisely. You're not going to screw this up. If we can make this device powerful enough to evolve every Pokemon in the region, then Giovanni will come back to us. Not if I have anything to say about it, Lance said. I'll send you packing. Mary, get in there and stop the machine. Get her, Grunt. Ariana's henchman stepped up. I'll battle alongside you, Lance told her, and they took on their foes. It wasn't an easy battle by any means, but they overpowered the Team Rocket Grunt and Ariana. They ran off to regroup, but Mary and Lance had to take care of the machine. It was being run by enslaved Pokemon who were running on treadmills. Mary and Caw freed the Pokemon, and one was so grateful he joined the team. Foxy the Glameow was sent to the meadow. They left the abandoned hideout, and Lance joined Mary at the Pokemon Center for some rest. He thanked her for the help, and she let his coughing have some of her Pokemon's food. He told her he'd find some way to let her know where Team Rocket was hiding if she wanted to help finish them off. Which she did. As she and her team rested in the center, they prepped for the next day's training and gym battle. And now, previously on episode 6. Mary took her team out for some much-needed training, and not only did they want to go, but Brutus, Billy, and Allie wanted to train too. Brutus especially wanted to get back to his full potential. During training, Allie evolved into Ambipom, and she learned a few new moves to help boost her power. Mary had 9 fully trained Pokemon she knew she could trust with her whole heart. Brutus and Allie went back to the meadow afterwards, but Billy insisted on staying around, riding on Mary's shoulder as everyone approached the 7th gym in Mahogany Town. Mary walked in feeling confident in her Pokemon's abilities, and they did not disappoint her. The gym trainers fell with ease. When she walked up to the gym leader, the old man looked her over with scrutiny. Huh! Another young whippersnapper that thinks they can just waltz in here and take their gym badges with hardly a challenge. That last boy, Ice, he called himself, knocked out my primary team, so if you want to crack at me, you'll have to battle my reserves or come back tomorrow. I will battle whomever you choose to send out, Mary replied. My team will provide plenty of challenge to yours. We'll see. I've been alive for many more years than you have, child. Mary stifled a laugh, as this man would have to be over 400 years old to manage that. Despite her outward appearance to these people, who only saw her child self, she was over 3 centuries old. I, Price, will give you a battle you won't soon forget. I'm ready when you are. Skiploom, you're up. Flare, you're in charge. Mary's Arcanine took down the grass-type Skiploom with one Fire Fang. Price sent in Perugly next, so Mary opted to swap into October. Perugly lowered October's attack stat greatly, but Mary offered him encouraging words and he went in for a rock smash that took away a third of his foe's health. Both Mary and October were frustrated that his attack didn't do more, but as Perugly started tickling October with Fury Swipes, he looked back at his trainer. Don't worry, your power is still there. It may take longer to fight, but I know you can do this, Mary told him, and October grinned. He slammed his iron fists into Perugly twice more after taking minimal damage from Fury Swipes, and he won the round. Price's last Pokemon was the Ice and Psychic-type Smoochum that October knocked out with Iron Head. Mary won the battle and hugged her Aggron, who squeezed her tightly. Flare, as usual, tackled Mary and licked her all over. Price stepped up next to them and cleared his throat. Though you fought my weaker team, you didn't treat them as inferior. You battled them with the same prowess you would have any Pokemon. I'm impressed by you, and that takes a lot, he told her, and then gave her the Glacier Badge. Wear it with pride. I will do that, Mary said. Your team was well-rounded, especially your Perugly. Thank you. Mittens likes a good battle every now and then, and that Aggron gave it to her. Price smiled as they looked upon October petting Mittens on the tummy, while Skiploom and Smoochum sat on his shoulders. A gentle giant with a soft heart of steel. It was an honor, Miss Mary. It was my pleasure to battle. Her Pokegear started ringing, and when she answered it, Professor Elm was on the other end. Mary, thank goodness I could finally get through. There was a line outage for a long time, and I was starting to worry I'd never get a hold of you. Team Rocket has been spotted in Goldenrod City, so I was trying to call to warn you to stay away. Team Rocket? Price and Mary gasped in unison. Those devils are at it again. Price ground his teeth. Professor, where in Goldenrod were they seen? Mary asked. The radio tower. Why? No particular reason, she replied, then hung up on him. Mr. Price, sir, do you have a history with them? I was once one of their scientists, he confessed, and Mary gasped. I thought it was a straightforward job until they started assigning crueler and crueler experiments on Pokemon. I left without notice and stole those 3 Pokemon you battled just now. Have you had experience with them too? I've had my fair share of fights with them, Mary told him. Then you must go and end their reign of terror. If they've taken over the station, odds are all of their leaders will be there overseeing this operation. If you can take them down today, you'll stop them for good. I'll alert the authorities to be ready when you finish the job. I can certainly give it my best, Mary said confidently. Good luck, young trainer, Price said. Mary left, healed her team at the Pokemon Center, and jumped on her broom. She flew for Goldenrod City as fast as she could, and Price called to let her know everything was set. She met up with an officer who had procured a Team Rocket uniform for her. She changed in the Pokemon Center and brought out October, as he had the most sinister-looking presence as her partner. Billy plopped on her shoulder and fist-pumped. We are going to stop Team Rocket, he said confidently. Mary plucked him from her shoulder and held him in front of her. You are going in the meadow, Bilious, she told him firmly. But Billy wants to help, he protested. I said no. These people are dangerous, and if they see a mythical Pokemon like you, thy life will be in great danger. You will be going into the meadow with Brutus, Allie, and everyone else until I get back. Dost thou comprehend? She explained sternly. Billy looked dismayed, then nodded. Mary will be back after beating Team Rocket. Billy stays here, he repeated. Mary hugged him close for a second. Mary must be careful for Billy and his friends. I promise, she said, then placed him in the meadow. Brutus wanted to go, but she made him stay. Mary, with October by her side, walked the streets of Goldenrod City and went into the radio tower, without so much as a second glance from the grunts. October looked uneasy, so she steadied him lovingly. As she was about to go up the stairs, a ruckus kicked up from behind, and Mary turned to see Ice battling his way into the building. Mary growled under her breath, knowing she had to evade his detection before he blew her cover. Mary kept walking past a grunt, but, Hey, Grunt, help me out here! This kid's nuts! He said, and Mary had no choice but to turn around as Ice ran up. Hey, Rocket Brains, you interrupted my radio stations and threw off my concentration in my last gym battle because of that. I'm taking this place back so I can have my tunes again, Ice declared. What a hollow goal, Mary thought to herself, keeping her hat pulled down over her eyes to hide herself. Sadly, it didn't work. Oh my God, Ice laughed, looking at her. Mary, don't tell me you joined these losers. You're a bad trainer, but you're better than them. Mary, the grunt muttered, then got a better look at her. Oh crap, you're the kid that's been destroying our plans left and right. I've got to alert October, attack! Mary ordered her Agron. The grunt sent out his Gyarados and October took it down. The grunt started to run, but Ice tripped him. Listen to me, boy. I have to take these villains down. If you want to help me, make sure no one leaves the building. Battle to your heart's content, but do not let a single grunt leave. Why would I ever help you? He asked. You've been a thorn in my side from the start of all this. Because, once this is over, I will battle you whenever you want a rematch, she said quickly. Do we have an accord? Deal, he reluctantly agreed, and she bolted up the stairs. Mary's team worked their way through grunt after grunt, leaving a trail of defeated trainers in their wake. If Team Rocket wanted to pull off whatever plan they had cooking, they'd have to go through her. Once again, the little voice in her head piped up as she battled more grunts. Why was she bothering to protect these Pokemon when human lives meant nothing to her? Why was she fighting so hard? Why did she care what Team Rocket was doing when it had nothing to do with her? Why was she always the one who had to be the peacekeeper? These thoughts ran in her mind over and over as she continued her onslaught of battling until she made it to the director's office and smelled an imposter. Team Rocket is a good organization that will usher in a new age of Pokemon training, he was saying as she walked up behind him. They are smart, strong, and easily frightened? Mary asked, and the imposter screeched like a girl into the microphone he was using. Hello, Petrel. Not you again, he whined and threw off his disguise. Why are you? Oh, why can't you just leave me alone? Been asking myself the same question. Where is the real leader of this building? As if I'd tell you where our hostage was. Metajam, beat some sense into this girl. Ka, quickly, use dive. Ka jumped into the fountain of the director's office and Metacham used Calm Mind to boost its special stats. Ka jumped out and struck, leaving the Pokemon with 1 health point. Metacham used Mind Reader to take aim at Ka, but Ka struck first with Surf and knocked it out. In came his own Aggron that Ka took down again with Surf. Gallade was next and it used Swords Dance to sharply boost its attacking power. Ka used Dive again and Gallade boosted his attack again with Swords Dance. Petrel was planning a single-hit kill. Unfortunately for him, Ka struck first and knocked Gallade out in a single hit. Gliscor proved to be an easy foe as Ka's Ice Fang knocked it out quickly. Nidorina and Shuckle both fell to Surf and Mary's jaw dropped. Her Huntail defeated a Rocket admin all by himself. Ka wasn't even done yet. He slithered out of that little fountain and wrapped his body around Petrel's legs as he made a run for it, bringing down the clown. Now, dost thou wish to tell me where the hostage is? She asked. In Goldenrod's underground shopping mall. Storage basement. Here's the key, he whimpered. Just don't let your Huntail eat me. Ka licked his lips menacingly. Ka, don't eat that. He's full of crap that will make you sick, Mary said, and Ka let go, not without a lunge at Petrel, who shrieked again. Mary returned him to his ball and started running down the stairs and out of the building. She dashed for the underground shopping mall and found the locked door and another girl who looked like Sakura and Satsuki. Her name was Komomo, and she was the sister of both girls. She'd heard someone shouting for help inside, but she had no way in. Mary told her what was going on, and Komomo decided to help keep a perimeter at the tower. As Mary walked into the storage facility, a voice called from behind. All right, now let's battle, Ice said, cracking his knuckles. Now is not the most opportune time, Mary protested, but he held up a hand. You said, whenever I wanted the rematch, and I want it now, he said. I did my part, so hold up your end of the bargain. There is a man in danger, she reminded him. and you can play hero when I'm done beating you," he replied. "I don't have time for this!" Mary tossed her first Pokemon out as he called in his. Hercules defeated his Snorunt with 2 moves. His Burmy used Protect a few times to stall Hercules out, but she was too strong for it. Trico lost to Hercules, and in came Metang. This thing was a bit bulkier, so Mary started swapping into Flare when Metang used Pursuit and damaged Hercules on her retreat. Mary held her breath, but Hercules survived, and Flare jumped into the fight. Her Fire Fang defeated the Pokemon in 1 hit, and in came Heracross. Rubix was ready to fight his old rival, and he came out victorious with a single Air Slash. Ice was defeated, and he punched the wall on his way out. Mary shook her head and pressed on. She battled her way through a few more grunts before she rescued the radio director. He gave her a key to unlock the employee-only areas, so she returned to the tower to finish the job she started. "Well, well, well, look who it is," Proton said as Mary crossed his path. "Long time since the Slowpoke well, Mary. You've caused us more trouble than I thought you would back then." "Pity thou hast not learned thy lesson," she replied. "Tell me something. Why do you care what we do? It's not like we were directly threatening you at first." I don't know," she replied. "I just do." "Not a good enough reason to me," he said, and they started their battle. October took out his Claydol, and Mary had to fight a mythical Pokemon called Darkrai that had fallen under his control. October used Rock Smash twice, and then smashed the Pokeball he was attached to. Darkrai thanked both October and Mary before fleeing. "You must have some reason for caring so much," Proton growled. "No one would have taken the time to free Darkrai if they didn't." "I told you. I don't know," Mary said, then pressed on. She met up with Ariana. "Oh, so you're the one who made Petrel cry earlier," she huffed. "Well, aren't you just the little hero?" I'm no hero," Mary replied. She wasn't referring to this world. "I'm just trying to stop you." "Why?" Ariana asked. "We weren't bothering you." "No, but what you were doing bothered me," Mary said, her fingers curling into fists. "We weren't after your Pokemon, so why do you care what happens to those you don't even know?" "I just do!" Mary snapped. "They're innocent creatures!" "Innocent creatures to be used for our gain," Ariana replied. "Your endeavor ends here, not if I can help it." Ariana's Cleffa fell at Rubix's feet after he used Aurasphere. Her Totodile was defeated by him too. Rubix battled valiantly against Kingdra and took it out with Fly and an Air Slash. Ariana huffed again as she realized she lost. "You are such a goody two-shoes," she spat at Mary. "Your kind and caring nature blinds you to the realities that innocents are only to be used and never respected. Pokemon are tools and nothing more." The words Proton and Ariana were saying began to get to Mary. Those questions she asked herself were louder now. Why save Pokemon when she destroyed so many other lives? Why? As she stepped into the tower's peak, she laid her eyes on a well-dressed man in a pristine Team Rocket uniform. "Tell me, Mary Sanderson, why are you here?" he asked her. "Yes, I know who you are. You've been causing trouble for us since the Slowpoke well. But I'm aware of more than my underlings. You're not who people see you as. You're much more than that. It seems we were the ones to test your resolve since, well, you share so many similarities with us outside of this world. So, why would a witch who devoted her life to destroying the lives of many innocents, children, for example, work so hard to defeat us at every turn? Why put yourself through this when you're no better than we are? Take your time and answer truthfully." There was a long silence that followed as Mary thought about his quandaries. "I suppose I'm trying to make up for my mistakes, my evil deeds that I have done. I don't know why I'm working so hard to do this. I don't. But perhaps when I saw my older sister give up her wickedness for me and for our little sister, I had a realization. Maybe that's why I'm trying so hard to stop you villains. I want to do something selfless for someone else, instead of always being selfish. Yet within your own family, you are the most selfless of them. So you don't believe that part true, then," he went on. I have to keep the peace between them, so that I may have some for myself," Mary told him. "I've said it. Are you satisfied? I keep the peace between my sisters so I can have peace for myself. Now, are you going to leave quietly, or not?" "I think not," he smirked. "I am Archer. the leader of Team Rocket, at least until Giovanni returns, when we use this radio tower to broadcast our return to him. And you won't stop us by being the selfish witch you are." "Then I'll let go," she replied, and their battle began. Cobweb Jr. went up against Archer's Cranidos and won. Then Flare took out his Curlia. Mary kept her focus on keeping the Pokemon safe. She wasn't letting anyone else be taken by Team Rocket if it ended her journey right here. Flare looked back at Mary as the last Pokemon came in. Their hearts connected, and Flare nodded. She used Fire Fang on the Riolu and took Archer down right as the authorities ran in with the director. Mary had defeated Team Rocket for good, but she was shaking from all the realizations she had just endured. The director thanked her profusely for freeing everyone in the company, and he gifted her something special. "This is a rainbow wing. It's said to have fallen from the feathers of a legendary Pokemon that once roosted in the bell tower of Ecruteak City. It is said to only appear to trainers with the purest hearts," he told her. Mary shook her head. "I am not worthy of such a token," she replied, but the rainbow wing glowed faintly. "It seems that you and that heart of gold are worthy of the wing. Take it, and best wishes," he said, closing her fingers around the feather. After checking her map, Mary set off one more time for Mahogany Town, where she crossed to the next route and caught Mumble, the Prinplup. She walked all night to the entrance of a cave where she camped with her team of Pokemon. Billy had rejoined the team as an extra for the time being, and as everyone else was sleeping, he stayed up with a very contemplative Mary. He floated around as she stared at the flames of their campfire. "Why does Mary look sad?" he asked, hovering nearby. "I'm not sad, Billy," she told him, and he floated closer. "Mary is not the same as she was before fighting bad guys today." "Nope, not the same." Billy shook his head. "Mary is upset." "I am not upset, Billy. I'm merely thinking," she told him. "What is Mary thinking about?" "My life. What I've done. Where I started and how I got to this point," she sighed. "I only wish I had answers to my own questions." "Mary is smart. Mary will answer these questions," Billy said, and plopped into her lap with a grin. "I'm not so sure this time," she exhaled. "Mary had a bad day. Tomorrow will be better," Billy promised, then wrapped himself in his tails and fell asleep in her lap. Mary let out another long breath, then laid down by her Pokemon, all of whom snuggled close to her. She smiled a little as she fell asleep, knowing Billy was probably right. Mary and her team made their way through the icy cavern where she caught Wynot, the Wynot, and met up with Tamayo, another sister of Sakura. She helped her cross the ice, and they both exited the cave together. Mary met a Jigglypuff in Blackthorn City that she caught and named Confetti. Mary decided it was high time her entire team took a well-deserved break for the whole day. She brought everyone out of the meadow and spent time with every Pokemon she owned. Brutus could tell his trainer was troubled, and when no one was looking, he hugged her tight as she cried into his neck. She didn't want anyone else to see her cry, but she was group hugged by her main six, her whole meadow, and Billy. "See? Today is a better day for Mary," he grinned. And now... Previously on episode 7. Mary's team felt relaxed as they stepped into the final gym in the Johto region. She felt the confidence radiating from each Pokeball, and she challenged the first trainer. Billy had been returned to the meadow for the time being. Cobweb Jr. took down the Marowak with ease, but when Gallade came in, Mary's good day turned sour in a split second. Gallade used Swords Dance to boost its attack sharply, and Cobweb Jr. insisted he could fight with his special extrasensory move. Against her better judgment, Mary allowed this, and he dealt a fair amount of damage. Gallade used Swords Dance again, and Mary commanded her Venusaur to use the move again. As Cobweb Jr. prepared to use the move, Gallade struck with Psycho Cut, and Mary's heart stopped. Cobweb Jr. took the brunt of the impact, then fell to the ground. The life left his eyes, and she screamed for him. Rubix burst into battle and used Air Slash to end the Gallade and take out the third Pokemon. Mary rushed to the body of her Venusaur and lifted his head in her hands. "No! No! Cobweb! Junior, come on! I cannot lose thee again!" Earlier in her journey, Cobweb Jr. had fallen in battle, and she used a life potion to revive him. Her heart raced as she returned to his body to his Pokeball and rushed to the Pokemon Center. She used the PC to get to her meadow and removed her Budew. Mary selected Ginger because the little Buddu had been sick for a long time now. She had tried on a number of occasions to heal her, but Ginger just could not get better. Even Billy had tried to no avail. Sadly, Ginger was the one Mary chose to give up. Mary sat in the grass as the potion brewed, Ginger laying against her side, breathing heavily, as Billy, who'd jumped out too, hovered above Cobweb's body. He hadn't been around the first time when this had happened, and he looked at Mary nervously. "What is Mary doing with this potion?" he asked her. "I'm going to show Ginger a mercy," she replied. "You and I both know she hath been suffering for a long time now." "Yes, Billy's heel pulse did not help," he said, then looked at Cobweb Jr. "Why is Cobweb asleep?" "He will wake up soon." Mary dodged the question as she finished the potion. "He's merely napping." She picked up her Buddu and gave her a kiss on the bud. "I am sorry, Ginger, but I hope thou wilt be able to rest and leave thy pain behind now." Ginger nodded to her, wheezing. Mary fed a few spoonfuls of the potion to Ginger, who began to glow. Mary carried her over to Cobweb Jr. and inhaled, directing Ginger's life force into him. When the Buddu went limp, Mary hugged her close and whispered her thanks before returning her to the ball. Cobweb Jr. coughed and his eyes fluttered open a minute later. He looked at Mary apologetically and she hugged him around the neck. "Please, stop trying to prove your strength. I know you miss Barbossa, and you are doing it for him, but please do not risk thy life again. I have the supplies for only one more potion, and I do not like losing our friends," Mary said tearfully. "But I am glad thou art all right." The rest of the team hurried to gather around their friend and embrace him. Billy floated over to Mary and sat down on her shoulder. "Did Mary show Ginger mercy?" "Yes, Billy. By letting her go from this world, she may live on through Cobweb. Her life force restored him, and her suffering has ended," Mary explained. "It is a sad trade," Billy sighed, "but also a happy one." "You're right," she replied. "Does Mary have to go back into that gym?" Billy asked. "Yes, so you must return to the meadow," Mary told him and got ready to go back. Once back inside, her team unleashed their power and took out every trainer in their path. There were far more here than any other gym, and Mary stuck with her gut from here on out, even if her Pokemon wanted to disagree. Finally, she approached the gym leader named Claire. "So my trainers gave you a tough time," she chortled. "They're peasants compared to my power." "That is not an attitude befitting a gym leader," Mary criticized her. "It is when you're the best. Want to find out?" Claire huffed. "'Tis why I'm here," Mary replied. "Get ready to lose," Claire said. "I'll beat you without my dragons. All I need is my secondary team. Cobweb, show her why you've returned from the grave twice." Mary's Venusaur went into battle against Golduck. Normally, Mary would have had him sit out due to his condition, but she didn't have a choice here. Besides, Cobweb Jr. was itching for a fight. He took a couple of water pulses, but his Razor Leaf attack was too powerful for the water type to handle, and he took it out. Next came an Ambipom, a Pokemon with which Mary was familiar thanks to Allie. She decided to switch into Rubix since he had the best type matchup and moveset. Rubix looked back at Mary with a confident nod. Ambipom used Screech to lower his defensive stats. "Rubix, use Aura Sphere! Ambipom, double hit at full power!" Claire's Ambipom moved faster than Rubix and struck her first blow at critical power, plunging Rubix into red health. Mary's heart stopped yet again as Rubix took a second hit and flew backwards. He landed with a thud at Mary's feet, looked into her eyes, smiled, and succumbed to death. Mary couldn't believe it. She didn't want to believe it. Rubix was her team's rock. He was her friend, and here he lay, dead at her feet because of one tragic twist of fate. As she looked at his lifeless body, Claire piped up. "One dead Togekiss doesn't mean our battle is over. Bring out your replacement." "No one can replace Rubix," Mary growled under her breath. "But plenty will avenge him. October, Ironhead with everything you've got." Mary sent in her Aggron, who looked at her rage-filled eyes, then down at his oldest friend. October saw red and he saw the smirking Ambipom. October let out a savage roar, lit his head with steely energy, and plowed into the Ambipom with a powerful force. The Ambipom coughed from the impact as it flew backwards and hit the ground. Claire swapped Ambipom with Kingdra, so Mary switched the roaring October with Ka, who saw the lifeless body of his friend. The sea serpent hissed angrily and charged the Kingdra. His ice fang tore into the water dragon type while he took blows from Twister. Mary healed him, and he pulled off a freeze status on Kingdra with his next ice fang. Claire healed her Pokemon too, but Kingdra was still frozen. This allowed Ka to go to town for a few turns until it thawed out. Then they exchanged blows for a while longer. Eventually, and after another heal stall, Ka came out on top and defeated the opposing water type. Ambipom returned to the fight, and October charged back in Ka's place. Ambipom used double hit, but it barely tickled October, who slammed his fist into its gut with a snarl. Rock Smash knocked it out, and Unknown was the last Pokemon. October slammed it with Iron Head and won the battle. The last gym was defeated, but October wanted to fight Claire now. He roared at her, then turned tail and ran back to Mary's side in tears as she cradled Rubik's in her arms, sobbing herself. "Pathetic," Claire snorted at them. "You lose one Pokemon and you break down in tears? There's no way I'm handing over my badge to some crybaby like you." "What?" Mary snapped at her. "We won this gym battle, and you refuse to acknowledge that with a badge? You won the battle, but the way you're on the ground sobbing is pathetic. You want my badge? Prove to me you're worthy of it by taking the Dragon Master's challenge. Even I haven't beaten it, so if you do, I'll give you the badge," Claire instructed her. Mary returned Rubik's to his ball and snarled at Claire. "The only unworthy trainer here is you," she growled. "I'll take thy challenge, but when I overcome it, thou wilt see how unworthy thou art of the title of trainer." Mary went to the PC and this time brought everyone out of the meadow. She laid Rubik's body out for everyone to see, then dropped to her knees in tears. Brutus put his taloned hands on her shoulders and moaned solemnly. He was ready to step in, but he knew she still needed her Togekiss. Mary sniffed hard, then looked at all of her Pokemon. I don't want to lose anyone else," she told them. "I do not want to sacrifice anyone else. You all mean so much to me, but Rubik's," she choked out the words. "He is one of my best friends, and I cannot bear to go without him. He had a hard exterior, but he broke down his walls and allowed us inside. He loved us all deeply, and I love him. I have but one potion left that can be brewed. I will only use it if one of you feels ready to pass on." Lucian, the Pidgeotto, stepped forward in front of Mary. He looked her in her teary eyes and nodded. He had been so closed off since being rescued from Team Rocket that no one had been able to get close to him. Mary thought it might have been some sort of trauma from his time with those villains. He was so scared of everything and everyone, but in this moment, he was the bravest Pokemon she'd ever met. Mary reached out to stroke his feathers, but he still flinched. This was why he was choosing to sacrifice himself. He couldn't live with his pain any more. Mary brewed the last life potion and fed it to him. Lucian began to glow. "Thy sacrifice will not be in vain, Lucian. Thank thee," she told him. "Though you were scared of us, I did love you." Mary inhaled and directed her Pidgeotto's life force into Rubik's. He fell lifeless, but for the first time, Lucian looked at peace. Everyone bowed their heads for his sacrifice, then Mary returned his body to his ball. Rubik's eyes fluttered open a moment later, and he looked up at Mary, who smiled at him, tears streaking her face. Rubik's pushed himself to his feet, then huddled up to her, and she hugged him. He rubbed his face against her cheek and cooed lovingly. He loved her very much. Brutus wiped a tear from his own eye as Mary snuggled her Togekiss. October stomped over at full speed, crying tears of joy, and snatched Rubik's in his steely arms. He hugged him tightly and babbled from joy. Everyone cheered for his return. Billy hovered over to Mary. "Billy understands now why Mary took the life force of Ginger. It is not because Mary did not love her. It is because Ginger was in pain. Lucian was the same way." Mary did not take their lives because she did not love them. It is because Mary loves all of her Pokemon and tends to them the best way she can. Billy hugged her arm. And Mary's Pokemon love her, too. Once everyone was squared away back in the meadow, and both Ginger and Lucian were laid to rest properly in the graves, Mary turned her attention to the challenge Claire dictated. She journeyed to the dragon's den, where she caught Nadja, the Poliwhirl. In the center of the lake was a hut, and when Mary entered, she met with an elderly man. "Mary Sanderson, I have been expecting you. Claire sent you because you beat her, correct?" "Yes, sir," she replied. "I will do whatever it takes to prove myself as a worthy trainer." "Not to worry, child, you already have," the elder told her kindly. "You passed the test before even coming in here." "How?" Mary was shocked. "As I was on my way over, I saw you with your Venusaur, Budew, Pidgeotto, and Togekiss. 2 lives traded for another, but not without remorse. And the lives exchanged were ones living in misery. You did not want those Pokemon to suffer any longer, so you ended their suffering, allowing them to live on through Venusaur and Togekiss. You have deep regard for all Pokemon and their needs, be they weak or strong. You recognize their strengths even when they seem weak, while also recognizing weaknesses in the strong. You know how to raise Pokemon with love, compassion, and care. I saw how they comforted you, not to mention that Jirachi on your shoulder now, with whom you have clearly developed a telekinetic bond. In my eyes, you are without doubt the most worthy trainer I'd ever met." He'd seen it all. "You have passed the Dragon Master's challenge." "What?" rang out an angry voice from behind. Claire stomped into the room, flicking her cape. "This is outrageous, Elder. You passed this stranger before passing me?" "And rightfully, Claire. You are so blind to the needs of your own Pokemon, you only care about their power. While that has earned you the rank of gym leader, I'd hardly call you a devout Pokemon trainer. This young girl has seen far more and done far more than you, and her experience is what defeated you. Hand over the badge, or I'll be forced to terminate your standing as a gym leader." "You can't do that. Only league officials can," she protested. "Then I'll inform Lance immediately," snapped the old man. Claire gulped, pulled the 8th badge from her pocket, and gave it to Mary. She left without so much as a word. Mary had done it. She was ready to face the Pokemon League and go home. The elder cleared his throat. "Now, Miss Mary, I have a Pokemon in my care that needs a new home. He is a loyal Pokemon and was abandoned by someone who thought him too weak for her team. Would you please take it and raise it right?" "Of course I will," Mary promised, and she obtained Henry, the Farfetch'd. "Good luck in the Pokemon League. I trust you will battle well." "We will do our best." Mary left, and her Pokegear rang. It was Professor Elm letting her know he had something to give her, so she flew back to New Barktown. He gifted her a Master Ball, and Mary was grateful to see it. He also gave her a letter addressed to her from Sakura. She was asking Mary to come to Ecrutique's dance theater to help them with something important. They were planning to summon the legendary Pokemon Ho-Oh, but something seemed weird about the energy their bell was radiating. Ho-Oh would only appear to a strong trainer, and she fit the bill. Mary didn't hesitate, and she flew to the theater, where she met up with Sakura, Satsuki, Tamayo, Komomo, and the 5th sister who'd watched her when Cobweb Jr.'s egg hatched, whose name was Kume. It turned out the egg was the clue to the trainer they needed for their ceremony, and the rainbow wing she'd been given by the radio tower director was the last piece. Mary was honestly flattered, and they asked her to test her strength against them. Their Pokemon were no match for Mary's, and soon the 6 ladies were heading for Bell Tower after Mary stowed Billy in the meadow for safety. Mary entered the building behind the 5 sisters and ended up catching a quillfish named Gabby. It took a long time and some deep focus for Mary to help the sisters solve the tower's puzzles, but eventually they made it to the roof. Mary held the rainbow wing in one hand and the clear bell in the other. Sakura instructed her to ring the bell in time with their dance, and Mary did so. She could sense great power in the area. A roar rang out and a giant phoenix creature descended from the sky. Mary could see that this was an illusion. "'Tis not Ho-Oh. Thou wert correct," Mary told Sakura. Then please engage the imposter so that Ho-Oh may return, Sakura begged her. Mary stepped up to the beast, and the illusion faded to reveal an Entei. Mary had owned his brethren Raikou and Suicune in the Kanto region, so now it was time to complete the trio. Hercules fought valiantly against the fiery foe, but in the end, to make Ho-Oh's home ready, Mary opted to throw the Master Ball. Entei has been registered to your Pokedex, her guide beeped. Kerosene, welcome to the team. I will take good care of thee, she promised him. Thank you, Mary. Perhaps now this town's deity will return to his rightful place, Sakura thanked her. Entei will make a great partner for you, especially with the Pokemon League ahead. He is in good hands, I promise, Mary nodded to them. Mary made a quick stop in Goldenrod City after receiving a call from Bill, the Pokemon box creator. He had heard of her exploits at the radio tower and gifted her a cyber Pokemon called Porygon 2 that he had named Glitch. Mary promised to take good care of him. She flew back to New Barktown and slept in the house where her Johto journey began. All of her Pokemon were stretched out on the floor with the exceptions of Rubix, who nested in bed with her, and Billy, who slept by her side like a little teddy bear. Mary laid awake thinking of how close she was to her sisters, and how sad she would be when she had to leave her Pokemon behind once more. Eventually, she did fall asleep. The next day, before departing from New Barktown, Mary caught Cassie, the Staraptor. Ka pulled her through the water to Route 27, where she caught Cynthia the Garchomp, and in Tojo Falls, she failed an encounter with a cast form, but it was no big loss. When she stepped out of the cavern, the map in her Pokegear read, Kanto region. Mary gasped as she realized where she was heading, the Indigo Plateau. She was going back for a second time with a new team, and she would fight just as hard as last time. On Route 26, Mary caught a Tyrogue named Tommy, and there it was, the entry to Victory Road. Here she caught a Mantine named Peter. Mary looked at her team and nodded confidently. It was time to train for their final challenge. And now, previously on episode 8. Mary and her team traveled through Victory Road with Billy tagging along on her shoulder. The closer they drew to the Indigo Plateau, the more Mary felt a cold feeling in the back of her neck. Was her team ready? Had they trained enough? She knew they had trained for a while, but was it enough? The sight of Cobweb Jr. and Rubix falling to the ground dead during the 8th gym flashed through her mind. She knew she was out of life potions, so if something were to happen in the league, there was no fixing it. Fear prickled across her skin as she saw the exit to the cavern, and her old nuisance waiting at the end. Just where do you think you're going? Ice asked her. I've earned my way to the Pokemon League. Thou wilt not stop me from reaching my destination, she said quickly, but he stood up and blocked the entrance. If anything, I should have stopped you from the very beginning, witch, he snarled. After that last battle in the underground of Goldenrod, I remembered everything. You're the reason I'm here. You left me locked in that cage for so long, Ice couldn't even finish his sentence. Well, I kind of died, so it isn't like that part was on purpose, Mary clarified, but this only caused a deeper glare. You don't get it. I haven't been able to think clearly since that Halloween night. I don't know what's real anymore. Everything you put me through. Was it real? Was I really in the clutches of witches, or was I having another episode? The doctors keep saying it wasn't real, but here you are, again. So am I in my own head? What is this world? He babbled. Mary finally realized what he was getting at. Ice had cracked after being held by her and her sisters. His mind was in a mental purgatory as she was in a physical one. She heard him begin to laugh almost maniacally. Boy, I will not take full responsibility for thy state of mind. Thou wert rotten when I got a hold of thee. She took a deep breath, and then owned it. But I will take responsibility for that night. I am sorry thy life turned out this way. That's why I told Winnie to end thee when we had the chance, because you would go mad if we didn't. You're just making this better and better. Ice laughed, throwing his hands up. Show me mercy by ending my life. Some mercy! If that's the case, maybe I should show the same mercy to you at last, Mary. He pulled a Pokeball from his belt. Your little redemption test ends here, because no one deserves it less. Surskit! He sent his bug type onto the battlefield. And that's why I'm out here. To prove I can do better, Mary said confidently. Ka! Ice Fang! Her sea serpent was so fast he pulled off 2 attacks before Surskit could make a move. He sent in Magnemite, which Mary countered with Flare. Flare knocked out the Pokemon with 2 bites and a Fire Fang. Garchomp was the next foe, so Ka came back into battle. Garchomp was fast and managed to hit Ka twice with Dragon Claw, but on the second hit, Ka used Ice Fang, dug his teeth into the land shark, and knocked it out in an instant. Spiritomb came in and Rubix met it in battle. He used Air Slash and made the foe flinch. Air Slash wrapped it up for Spiritomb and in came Heracross. Rubix's old foe met his match once again when Rubix used Air Slash and knocked him out. His last Pokemon was Kricketot, and it fell in one strike of Rubix's wings. Ice fell to his knees, laughing. He looked up at her, tears streaking his face. "Just tell me, were you real? Were the 3 of you real? I have to know," he pleaded. Mary didn't know which would hurt him more when he broke his trance, saying they were, or telling him it was a nightmare. "When you wake up again, you will know we were never there. It was a nightmare you'd had," she told him. Relief washed over his face. "Maybe now I can go home," he breathed. He faded out a moment later, and Mary let out a long breath. "Is Mary okay?" Billy asked. She nodded, though she wasn't even sure. "We only have a little further. Let's go," she told him. The Indigo Plateau stretched into the sunny sky as Mary laid eyes on the building. She had once fought in this place with her old team, and now she was going in with a new one. Mary entered the building and signed up for the Pokemon League beginning in the morning. She slept restlessly that night, even though her Pokemon slept peacefully. Everything that boy had said ran through her mind. So did the deaths of Rubix and Cobweb Jr., even though they slept close by. Not to mention the prospect of going back to Sarah and Winifred was also starting to be a little nerve-wracking. The next day couldn't get there soon enough, so she tried to get some rest. The next day, when her number was called, she entered the chambers of the Elite Four. Very few challengers had made it past this man today, but she was determined to. "I can sense strong power in you, Challenger," he said as she entered the room. "Your determination is high, but you are also nervous. Let's see if you can conquer those nerves today." "I will not lose," Mary promised. "Then I, Will of the Elite Four, will give you a battle worthy of such a trainer," he promised. "Let's go, Porygon!" "Rubix, you're up!" "Go, Rubix, go!" Billy cheered from Mary's shoulder. The battle began with Rubix blasting Aurasphere into the Porygon's body. It fell with ease. Yanma proved to be difficult as his hypnosis attack put Rubix to sleep and provided it ample opportunities to whittle down her Togekiss's health. Eventually, Yanma used Uproar and woke Rubix up. Big mistake. Air Slash knocked out the bug type and in came Volbeat. It stalled with Protect, but that didn't stop Rubix for long. He took out the bug with Air Slash and prepared for the next fight against Swalot. Mary, however, opted to swap him out for Hercules. She was starting to feel her nerves subside just a touch. Hercules had to fight through boosted defenses, but eventually her Psybeam overpowered the poison type. Drifloon was the last Pokemon, and Mary brought out October to finish the job. His Iron Head was too powerful for the ghost type. Will was defeated, and he shook Mary's hand. "You are only the 5th trainer to beat me, number 36, he said with a proud smile. "What's your name?" "Mary Sanderson," she replied. "Well, Mary Sanderson, go to the next room and face the second Elite Four." Mary healed her team, walked into the next room, and gasped. It was Koga! Koga was the gym leader last time she was here. He looked at her and sized her up. "Well, to make it past Will is no easy feat. However, you will not get out of this chamber as unscathed as last time. My comrade seems to have underestimated you, but I will not. I have known many trainers over the years, and I was once a gym leader. I know your type. You care for your Pokemon with your whole heart, but do not let your love for them blind you to attacks." "I won't, Koga. I have every faith in my Pokemon." "Then let us begin. Squirtle, on deck!" "October, do you think you can handle this?" Mary asked her Ragron. October looked at Squirtle, looked at Mary, and cracked his knuckles. "All right, I trust you. Go get it. Use Poison Jab!" October's fist lit up with toxic energy and flung the Squirtle across the room with a powerful hit. The water type hit the ground, and October let out a proud battle cry. Prematurely. "Squirtle, Hydro Pump!" Koga commanded as the tiny turtle struggled to its feet. It had lived on red health. Mary's eyes nearly popped out of her head as she saw Squirtle unleash a torrent of force-filled water that slammed into October. Her Aggron cried out in agony, his feet skidding backwards across the battlefield, and when the water ran out, He fell at her feet, dead. Mary let out an unearthly cry for the first Pokemon she ever caught in the Johto region and fell to her knees. She cradled him, trying to find any sign of life, but it had all been washed away by Hydro Pump. She cried over his body, and Billy hovered over his beloved friend. "October is gone?" he stammered. "Mary can bring him back." "No, I can't," she sniffed, kissing his steely head. "I'm out of life potions." "Not even one?" Billy asked. Mary shook her head. "October." "Never underestimate your opponent, Challenger. You did to Squirtle what Will did with you. On your feet and continue the fight." "Our friend has perished!" Billy shouted at him. "Billy, only I can hear thee," Mary told him as she got back to her feet. "Then Billy will fight in October's place," Billy said, grabbing his Pokeball from her bag. It wouldn't open for him to enter. "You're the 7th. I cannot use thee," Mary told him as she returned October to his ball. She grabbed a different one as Koga healed Squirtle. "But I know who I can use. Cobweb, avenge your brother!" Her Venusaurs charged into battle, eyes blazing with anger. Mary's words barely left her lips before he unleashed Razor Leaf with such power Squirtle fell in an instant. He stomped his feet and blew poisonous powder from his nostrils. Both he and Mary were thirsty for revenge. Gorbis was brought in to use Dive a few times to evade Cobweb Jr.'s attacks, but it was no use. The angry Venusaur was too strong. Lantern was the next opponent, and Cobweb Jr. unleashed his fury in a leafy storm once again, killing it in one shot. Nidorina thought it was safe, but Cobweb's special extrasensory move proved otherwise for the poison type. The same was said for the final Pokemon, Skorupi. Mary won, but at what cost? Cobweb Jr. plowed forward and slammed into Koga, knocking him into the wall. He roared at him over and over, berating him for what he did to October. Mary ran forward and pulled her crying Venusaur back as Koga got to his feet. "Control your Venusaur," he barked. "He is angry because thou hast killed his friend," Mary barked back, Billy clinging to Cobweb's head. Koga raised an eyebrow as he saw the tears streaming down Cobweb Jr.'s face. Mary hugged him around the neck, crying with him. "I see," Koga said with much less force. "That is the risk when battling, I'm afraid. Apologies and my condolences, but the League waits for no one. If you quit now, you will have to start over." Mary looked at Cobweb Jr. He nodded to her. She healed him, returned him to his ball, and walked on. They couldn't stop. Besides, it would be a dishonor to October to quit. The next chamber Mary met again with Bruno. Ka took out his Cubone with Surf, but had to be swapped with Rubik's to fight Porygon. Aurasphere took care of the normal type. Snorunt met the same end as Rubik's continued to fight. Mary became frightened when Bruno sent in Suicune, but Billy encouraged her to keep going. She sent in Cobweb Jr., who attacked with Razor Leaf as Suicune set up Rain Dance. The legendary beast fired back with Aurora Beam, causing a bit of pain for Cobweb, but he kept fighting back. His Razor Leaf attack brought the Suicune down to red health. He took one more Aurora Beam, then finished it off. He stomped his feet and waited for instructions as Dunsparce came into battle. Mary called him back and sent in Rubik's, who used Aurasphere twice to knock it out. She shook hands with Bruno as the battle ended, then walked to the next room. "Hey, I heard what happened in Koga's chamber," the lady said kindly. "You have my sympathy, Mary." "Thank thee. Shall we get this over with?" Mary asked. "Not with an attitude like that," she said with a smile. "It hurts, but your Aggron was strong. He just didn't hit hard enough. So in his memory, I want you to fight with all you've got, okay? Who art thou?" "Karen. I'm the newest Elite Four member, but I'm the best. So show me why you're the only one to reach me today." "I will," Mary said. "Yes, Mary will," Billy said confidently. Blastoise, a Pokemon with which Mary was very familiar, came in first. She countered with Cobweb Jr., who had taken on a majority of the Elite Four today. Skullbash hardly made a dent, and on Cobweb's second Razor Leaf, it came off at critical power. Blastoise fainted, and in came Hoot Hoot. Mary swapped into Caw to use Ice Fang, but he took an extra sensory first. The Ice Fang knocked out the owl quickly. Flare met in battle against the legendary Raikou, but the Arcanine was too angry about the loss of her best friend to hold back. All it took was 2 fiery heat wave attacks for her to take down the Raikou. Swampert was the next foe, and Cobweb Jr. came back in. His critical hit Razor Leaf knocked it out after 2 hits and a potion. Driftblim was last, and Mary tried to let Ka fight, but Shadow Ball was too strong. She switched to Rubik's instead, as ghost types had no effect on him. His fly attack coupled with Air Slash almost took it out, but Karen healed. Rubik's had to keep fighting, but the combination finally defeated it. The last Elite Four was finished, and only the champion stood in the way of Mary's family. Your Agron would be proud indeed. Karen shook her hand warmly. Go defeat Lance. I know you can do it. Mary can do it! Mary can do it! Billy cheered. Thank thee. Mary nodded to Karen. She moved forward and healed her Pokemon. Going up against a champion this time was going to be much harder than before. She only had 5 Pokemon. Mary's hands shook with nerves as she approached Lance. Billy rubbed his head against hers calmingly. Mary can do it, he said confidently. Hello, Mary. I thank you again for all of your help with Team Rocket. I would do it again tomorrow, Mary told him truthfully. But that's not why I'm here. You're right. You're here to try to dethrone me. We'll see if you can, Lance smirked. You lost 1 Pokemon today, didn't you? Let's hope you do not lose another. I won't let that happen, Mary said strongly. We'll see. Lance sent out his first Pokemon. Ledian! The Ladybug Pokemon buzzed out onto the battlefield. Flare, you can do it! Mary's Arcanine leapt into the fight, and the battle began. Her Heat Wave attack blasted into the Ledian and knocked it out immediately. Lance didn't hold back even a little bit as he sent in the legendary Titan of the Earth, Groudon. Mary's heart leapt into her throat as the Pokemon caused a drought of sunshine to rain on the arena. Ka's water attacks were useless, and she had no idea what to do. Maybe his Ice Fang attack could help, so she sent him in. Ka coiled up to use the move when Groudon struck with Earthquake. It landed at critical power and Ka fell dead before he could move. Mary wailed as her sweet sea serpent lay dead on the battlefield. Mary's heart broke as Billy cried out for another fallen friend. She ran forward, scooped up Ka, and carried him out of harm's way. Mary cradled him as she panicked about what to do next. How could she beat this thing without Ka? Cobweb Jr. burst out of his Pokeball, the rage of another friend's loss burning in his eyes again. He ran forward through the Earthquake attack and used Razor Leaf as damage sunk into him. His attack hardly did a thing to Groudon. Mary had no time to mourn for her Huntail, so she returned him to his ball. This was personal now, but she had to think logically. Cobweb's health was in yellow. Earthquake did too much. She healed, and he struck again. She had no choice but to heal stall Lance's advances with his mighty Titan. Cobweb Jr. stood strong in the face of every blow he took, knowing Mary would heal him. They just had to run out those earthquakes. Finally, they ran out the moves, and Cobweb Jr. was free to attack. He used Razor Leaf again and again, exchanging blows with the mighty legendary, but eventually Groudon used Rest and restored its own health. Mary let out an enraged cry alongside Cobweb Jr., but this was also fortuitous. Groudon was asleep. Mary knew the move they needed to use, but it was a risk, as Cobweb Jr. would be locked into only using it until he wore himself out or the foe was knocked out. They didn't have a choice. Use Petal Dance! Mary screamed at her Venusaur, and Cobweb Jr. unleashed his most powerful Grass-type attack. In one hit, the Groudon was defeated, and Cobweb roared. That's my boy! Cobweb, Cobweb, hooray, Cobweb Jr.! Billy cheered, doing loop-the-loops. You think this is over? Lance asked her. Not yet. Zapdos! Mary cursed under her breath as a legendary she once owned burst into battle. This was the risk Mary was terrified of. The Zapdos was both electric and flying type, and Cobweb Jr. was locked into Petal Dance, so she couldn't even swap him out. Zapdos struck with pluck and halved Cobweb's health. Petal Dance barely made a dent in the bird, and Mary held her breath to see if his move was done. Cobweb Jr. felt confusion status set in, and Mary gasped. She could switch! She called him back and sent in Flare, who howled, ready for battle. Flare wanted vengeance for Ka, and she ran at the legendary bird as it used Charge to prep for an attack. Fire Fang! Now! Mary shouted loudly at her mighty dog. Flare's teeth lit up with a blaze of embers, and she bit down hard on Zapdos' leg. Zapdos cried out in pain and could not unleash its attack from the shock. Flare pulled off extreme speed, but Zapdos lived on 1 health point. Lance healed, but Mary realized what she needed to do. Drought was still active from when Groudon was out here. The sun was boosting Flare's fire attacks. Mary called for Flare to unleash Heat Wave, and the move blasted into the legendary Pokemon at critical power. It fell, and Lance withdrew it. Flare howled and readied herself to keep fighting as Ambipom was brought in. These things were tough, but with a drought-boosted fire attack, Flare was tougher. Heat Wave smashed into Ambipom and it went down. Lance had his own Venusaur, but Flare saw through the imposter. Her Fire Fang attack knocked it out too. Mary's heart burned as brightly as Flare's flames. Her Arcanine was their final hope. Silcoon was their last foe. Flare looked back at Mary and they nodded to each other. "Fire Fang! One last time!" Mary shouted. Flare lit her fangs, sunk them into the bug type, and ended the battle. Mary dropped to her knees, sweat rolling down her back and tears rolling down her cheeks. She looked up at Flare and smiled. Flare barked, ran at her, and tackled her to the ground. She licked her trainer's face over and over again, licking off the salty tears. Without Flare, Mary's battle would have ended with Zapdos. Without Cobweb Jr., her battle would have ended with Groudon. These two Pokemon saved everyone on the team. Mary pushed Flare off, then hugged her tightly around the neck, Flare placing a paw on her back. Both of them cried as Cobweb Jr. popped out of his ball and snuggled the both of them. They won. They were the champions of Johto. Mary was ready to go home now. She was ready for all those who perished to return to life, and she knew who she was taking back to Purgatory with her. Lance approached them and nodded solemnly. "I'm sorry about your Huntail, but his sacrifice was clearly not in vain," he told her. Mary nodded, but did not speak. "Let's commemorate your team's triumph in the Hall of Fame." Mary walked with Lance to the chamber and saw on the wall a photo of Sarah and her Johto team. An Empoleon, Crobat, Luxray, Magmortar, Ursaring, and Ambipom. She looked so happy with her team, and Mary couldn't help smiling. Her 4 Pokemon stood by her side as images of October and Ka were added to their group photo. Professor Oak came in a moment later, and Mary was ready to go. "Ah, Mary, what a fantastic battle! I haven't seen such a fight in a long time. To commemorate your victory, I'm giving you clearance to visit the Kanto region. Use this ticket to board a fast ship to Vermilion City tomorrow morning," he announced, handing her the boat pass. Mary's eyes went wide. Professor Oak and Lance saw it as excitement. But for Mary, it was shock. She wasn't done? This wasn't over yet? She was sent off with cheers from the Elite Four as she flew back to Olivine City, where she would depart for Kanto. Mary cried sorrowfully as she buried both October and Ka in the box. She slept in the Pokemon Center that night with Billy by her side. Flare huddled up right next to the bed, whining in her sleep. Cobweb Jr. was right next to her, moaning. Hercules slept in the windowsill for the first time in ages, arms folded solemnly across her chest. Rubik stayed in the bed with Mary and Billy, but tears ran down both of their faces as they tried to sleep. Mary was going back to Kanto the next day. But why? She pulled her Pokédex from the side table. "Why am I still here? I did everything you asked of me. I won the league!" she barked at it. "Yes, you did. But your final challenge here is not the Pokemon League. You will need the 8 badges of Kanto once more to reach your final fight. Your confidence is shattered. Your heart is full of fear. This is not the Mary Sanderson who once wielded the mighty Rayquaza. The conflict within you will only resolve once you face your final challenge here. Kanto awaits. Please rest." "Is that all you have to say?" she asked it as it went dark. "I must get home. And if I have to start over in Kanto, then that is what I will do." As she arrived in the Kanto region the next day aboard the ship, Mary had been mulling something over. She was so attached to her team from Johto. She couldn't bear the thought of losing anyone else. Not after they fought so hard against Lance. She wanted to keep going with them, but things were looking bad. She knew they could handle the fights, but could she? Could she handle losing another one of her dear friends? No. When they docked at the port, Mary took her team to the Pokemon Center, but sat outside with them first. "Friends, thou hast done beautifully over the last couple of months out here, but the League took 2 of our beloved friends from us. I cannot bear to see that happen to any more of you. I've decided to start a new team here in Kanto. I'm familiar with this place, so I feel I can train new Pokemon to fight here. We've been through so much together, my friends, and I can't lose anyone else. I will keep you all trained up, but I want you four to stay in the meadow for a while. Understand? I need to start over in a different way here. That way, being with new teammates who will fight as hard as you. I love you all so much, and that's why I have to do this. I won't lose anyone else. Mary started crying, then felt a light touch under her eyes. Rubix wiped away her tears with his wing. He smooched her cheek and nodded. Flare licked her face and nodded too. Cobweb Jr. nuzzled her side and received a hug. Hercules hugged Mary, then gave her a thumbs up. Everyone understood her position. Mary put everyone in the meadow of the PC, but Billy remained and looked at her sideways. "What about Billy?" he asked. "You want to replace October on the team. Thy wish is granted. Only now thou art replacing him and Hercules," Mary told him, and Billy's eyes lit up. "Billy will battle hard for Mary. Billy will make Mary proud," he promised, squeezing his little fists together. Mary kissed him on the head, then chose her new team members. Brutus would lead the team as he replaced Rubix and Flare. Cynthia the Garchomp was the speed and muscle they needed, as well as the ground and dragon typing. Rarity would jump in as the water type with Surf, and she was big enough for Mary to ride. She also brought Allie, the shiny Ambipom, onto the team, as she knew her species was very strong. This was to honor Sarah, who had clearly done better in Johto than Mary. Mary still needed one more member, and it wasn't long before she caught Reptar, the Trico, on Route 6. He was the last piece. It was time for her to train everyone up and get ready for the next part of her journey. And now, previously on episode 9. Mary's team worked hard with their training, Brutus leading the way. He needed to get his own power levels back to where they were before, since his had been reduced by the proctor of Mary's trial. Billy was the first to really prove himself as a powerful, true addition to the team. He learned a medley of new attacks and fought against wild Pokemon with vigor. He wanted to make himself a worthy replacement for Hercules and October. It seemed Cynthia had been ready to join the team since she was caught, as every time she knocked out a foe with her powerful attacks, she would look at Mary for approval and grin when her trainer gave it to her. Rarity's water attacks grew with power every day she battled, eventually giving way to Hydro Pump. She would do Ka proud. She was also very friendly, nuzzling Mary when she needed a break. Reptar felt how small he was in comparison to his new friends, and it was clear he wanted to prove himself. Mary spent the most time training with him, since he was the lowest level on the team. After 3 days of training, he evolved into Grovyle, and on day 7, he evolved into a strong Sceptile. He struck like a skilled swordsman with his leaf blade attack, always having time for hugs when his turn was over. Allie was everyone's cheerleader. She encouraged each of her teammates to do their best with loud cheers and circles of friendship with her twin tails. Suffice to say, she was no slacker either. Mary could not believe how hard her Ambipom could hit. Mary smiled to herself as Allie battled against a rather powerful foe. Then she muttered, "I see now how thou wert able to take on such enemies, Sarah. If thy Ambipom was as strong as Allie, thou wert a force to be reckoned with." Mary's team was all set after a full week of training. She fed them her special Pokemon food in the Pokemon Center's dining area that night, and the warm smiles of enjoyment on her 6 Pokemon's faces made her heart feel a bit better after all of that tragedy. Still, Mary didn't want to get too attached to these 6 either. With the exception of Brutus, of course, for fear she might lose them again. Yet, as she settled into bed for the night, Billy tucked himself in right beside her as everyone else curled up on the floor in various spots on the floor, and he muttered, "Good night, Mary. Billy and friends love you," he said, then fell asleep. It was too late. She loved them, too. "This time no one dies," she promised herself, as she thought about her upcoming rematch with Vermilion's gym leader. The electric barrier puzzle was harder than she remembered, but eventually Mary got both gates to unlock. The gym trainers inside Vermilion City's gym fell at the feet of her new team. They were proving themselves right out of the gate. Billy was the most excited to finally get into the ring, as he had been along for the ride during most of Mary's journey in Johto. It wasn't too long before they approached the strapping gym leader. "Mary Sanderson, how long has it been?" Lieutenant Surge asked. Wait, he knew her? "You remember me?" she asked in surprise. "Well, of course I remember you. How can you forget someone who trained a Rayquaza?" Surge laughed. "How is your old dragon?" "Well, he and I have parted ways. It was time for him to resume his duties as Lord of the Sky," Mary confessed, thinking of Broomy and how he was doing, secretly hoping maybe they would meet again. "That's not to say I do not possess the same skill anymore." "I should hope you don't," Surge stated, and she looked confused. "I would hope you have advanced as a Pokemon trainer since we last met, because I've changed it up a bit for you." "Then I suppose 'tis time we see how both of us have grown," she said. "I was thinking the same thing," Lieutenant Surge said. "Let's go, Girafarig!" He had a new Pokemon. "All right, Rarity, give it all you've got in thy first gym battle," Mary sent in her Milotic. Girafarig opened with Zen Headbutt that collided with the Sea Serpent. Rarity retaliated with Hydro Pump, hit her mark, and knocked out the opponent. Next came Vigoroth, who used Slash as Rarity set up Aqua Ring. She moved into Surf, which knocked Vigoroth down to red, at the same time she was plunged into low health from the critical Slash. Mary and Surge both healed their Pokemon, then went on the attack again. Slash hit at much less power this time, while Surf landed at more strength, enough to knock out the Vigoroth. Rarity's Aqua Ring healed some of her damage, as Surge brought out Combuskin, only for it to fall to a super effective Surf. Mary was beaming as she watched her Milotic handling this gym all by herself. Rarity glanced back at her and nodded with a smile. Kadabra tried to copy Rarity's ability, but squandered its turn as Hydro Pump crashed into it. Surge smirked at Mary as he withdrew his Pokemon. "You're doing great so far. Same old powerhouse as always. Your Milotic's magnificent, but I've got one more surprise up my sleeve for you. You're not the only one with a legendary anymore," he said. "Azelf, lend me your fighting spirit." A small blue Pokemon burst onto the battlefield. "What is that?" Mary held up her Pokedex. Azelf, a legendary psychic Pokemon. "This Pokemon is known as the Being of Willpower," it told her. "Willpower, huh?" She pondered, then locked eyes with Rarity. "We'll show them how much willpower we possess." "Azelf, Future Sight!" Surge's legendary set up an attack that would land in 2 turns. That damage would be added on top of whatever damage he did in that specific turn. Mary knew she was now running on an hourglass, and there was no way she was losing another Pokemon. "Rarity, use Hydro Pump!" Rarity's attack smashed into the Azelf, plunging it down to red health, but it survived on 1 health point. Surge had to waste a turn healing as Rarity used Twister, then quickly turned around and used Hydro Pump one more time. This time, the legendary Pokemon wasn't prepared, and it fell just before Future Sight would have hit. Rarity let out a proud, melodic battle cry, and Mary cheered loudly for her. Billy had been hovering nearby the entire time, and he burst into joyful shouts. "Rarity, Rarity, Rarity's moves are unstoppable!" Surge finally spotted him. "So you do still have a legendary Pokemon," he chuckled as he walked over. "Not a bit surprising given your skills. Milotic was impressive to say the least. No one has ever been able to best Azelf, and she did. Good work, and once again you have earned the Thunder Badge." Surge gave her his badge, and Mary pinned it to her cloak. "Go give the rest of the Kanto leaders a good thrashing for me." "You got it," Mary promised, shaking his hand. She walked up to Saffron City, then decided to head towards Lavender Town for a magic recharge. She hadn't had one since Johto. On the way, she battled a trainer who possessed an Articuno that Brutus was ready to fight. He unfortunately got hit with an ice beam that froze him in a block of ice, all but his head. Mary called for him to use a fire move to burn through, but he just couldn't do it. She had to heal him a couple of times, but eventually he got so angry that the flame on his tail burst into an inferno and he broke out of the ice. Brutus soared into the sky towards Articuno and unleashed a lava plume that knocked the legendary bird down in a single blazing hit. Brutus huffed and puffed hard after it was over, even tearing up a little bit. Mary hugged him, then gave him some scratches behind the horns. "You're just a little out of practice, dear. It will come back to you. Do not let one frustrating battle get the best of you," something she herself needed to remember. "Brutus is the best Charizard there is!" Billy hugged his neck, causing Brutus to smile. He felt much better after their words. In the grass on that particular route, Mary caught a Porygon named Origami. After spending the night in Lavender Town, Mary decided to strengthen her reinforcements in the box by making her way to Fuchsia City, where Koga's old gym was. She was also curious as to whom took his place as leader there. On Route 11, she caught a Lediba, which she called Miraculous, and then, after quite the fight on Route 12, she caught Insanity, the Relicanth. Route 13 brought a rare encounter with a Pokemon called Absol, which Mary caught and named her Hotaru. Her Pokedex said this would be a powerful ally. Route 14 saw the sighting of the false Suicune and one more visit from Eugene, who seemed pretty sure he knew where it was heading. Mary had her own suspicions, but she wasn't ready to fight it quite yet. On this route, she caught a Squirtle named Donnie, though most would have considered this a terrifying thing to see after losing October to one of those. Mary was actually happy to see him since she had raised a Blastoise before. Route 15 saw the addition of Ginger II the Diglett before they reached Fuchsia City. She jogged over to Route 18 and caught Annabelle the Bayonet before calling it a day. She was heading to the center when she saw something in a nearby pond. A Dusclops was crying, and she went to investigate. It looked familiar. Mary, upon Rarity's back, surfed out to it. "What's the matter, Dusclops?" she asked it, and it looked at her, then did a double take. It quickly threw its arms around her in a hug. Dusclops, a ghost type. This Dusclops once lived in the Safari Zone with Rubix. According to my data, it was recently caught by a trainer, then released here after a failed gym battle, her Pokedex informed her. Mary hugged the Pokemon back now. "Well, how about we reunite you with Rubix, huh?" Mary smiled, patting its back. "Your old friend Togekiss will be pleased to see you." Dusclops hopped in a Pokeball with no fuss and was named Celia. When Mary brought her new friend to Rubix, he lost his mind with happiness. Celia and Rubix hugged and caught up as all of Mary's Pokemon ate their dinner. She was so happy Rubix was still around to see her again, as she put them back in the meadow. Mary and her team rested at the Pokemon Center for the night, and thought about who might await them tomorrow in the gym. "I'm Janine, Koga's daughter," the gym leader introduced herself once Mary battled her way to her. "Most people think I just got this position because of my dad, but I'm working hard to prove myself as a worthy leader. I'm still trying to find my perfect type, though. Not sure I want to use poison type like Dad. I hope you're ready for a great battle." "I'll be happy to help you figure out what you'd like to specialize in, but do not underestimate me either," Mary said. She'd underestimated Koga's Squirtle, but she wouldn't make the same mistake with his daughter. "Okay, here we go," Janine said. "Drapion, show 'em what you've got." "Cynthia, your first gym battle awaits." Mary's Garchomp was ready to fight, and she knocked out the poison and dark type with one dig attack, but not before Drapion set up toxic spikes. This was a problem because if Mary had to switch out, her next Pokemon would be poisoned. Cynthia gave Mary a reassuring look as Shinx came into battle. Shinx fell to Dragon Claw and in came Aerodactyl. This proved to be a bit more challenging as Cynthia took 2 takedowns and she used 2 Dragon Claws to end the fight. Ninjask was the next Pokemon and Mary smiled, thinking of Icy, but she also knew its weaknesses. Cynthia struck hard with Dragon Claw and the speedy bug fell after trying to boost its attack stats with Swords Dance. Electrike was the last foe and Cynthia struck with Dig, ending the battle all by herself. Mary cheered wildly for her dragon type and hugged her tightly around the chest. Cynthia hugged back with a toothy grin. Janine walked over to them. "Well, I guess I'm not going to be an electric-type gym leader since I wasn't ready for the ground moves. I'll keep workshopping, but your Garchomp was awesome. She's so powerful. You both earned the soul badge for sure. She smiled and handed Mary her second badge in the Kanto region. Keep up the great work. Count on it, Mary said. She was proud of her new team, and she knew they could do anything together. And now... What the... Sarah and her 3 Pokemon heard a crash from Mary's room. They hurried up the stairs, looked in, and... Brutus! The Charizard was bellowing and crying, thrashing and searching for something. Sarah ran in, and Brutus saw her. He practically tackled his first trainer, and Sarah hugged him tightly. He was a sobbing mess as Carlos ran over to check on him, too. Honey and Allison had yet to meet Brutus, but this was hardly the time for introductions. Brutus, sweetheart, what happened? And where are Mary and Cabby? Sarah asked him. Brutus moaned in an attempt to tell her. Previously on episode 10. Mary and her team decided it was time to track down the false Suicune, and on their way up to Cerulean City, they caught a Grimer on Route 5 and named it Ectoplasm. Now, beyond coming to find the Suicune, Mary knew there was a gym here, too. However, when she arrived, the gym was locked up tight. It had been a long day, so they checked into the Pokemon Center, where Mary fed the team their dinner. Mary was really happy with everyone as she tended to her friends, but a conversation caught her ear that was taking place nearby. 2 workers from the power plant were discussing a burglary of an essential part of the machine. Apparently, it was Team Rocket. Upon hearing that name, Mary and Billy nodded to each other. The Suicune would have to wait. First thing the next morning, Mary set off towards Route 9 looking for clues. Mary sailed on Rarity's back down to Route 10 to the power plant in hopes of getting the scent of the thief. Here she caught a Whismur named Floppy for the big ears it had. Then she picked up the familiar scent of Team Rocket. She followed her nose back to Cerulean Gym and, to get inside, she used her magic to break in. As soon as she did, a Team Rocket grunt freaked out and tried to run past her, but she shoved him back with a small bolt of lightning. "And where do you think you're going?" she asked him. "Get out of my way, lady," he barked. "I'm in no mood to be messed with. Some kid in Johto ruined our plans, so this is my shot at restoring our glory." "It's a shame you ran into me then." "I'm the kid from Johto," Mary smirked, and the Team Rocket grunt looked her up and down. "Good one, lady," he chuckled. It was at that point Mary finally caught sight of her reflection in the gym's pool. Her childlike appearance had been, in a word, washed away. This made her very happy. "Now get out of the way!" "Oh no, I do not think so." Mary closed the door and laughed. "Seems I'm all grown up again, so there's no reason to be so innocent." The grunt was starting to reach for the Pokeballs on his belt. "You are going to tell me where you hid that piece of steel that makes the power plant run, or you will lose in a Pokemon battle and then tell me where it is." "Numel! Allie, get him!" Mary's shiny Ambipom burst onto the field to take on the fire ground type. "Headbutt!" Allie struck hard and the Numel fainted to the horror of the Team Rocket grunt. "Where is it?" Over by the inner tubes," he stammered. "As I do not know what those are, go and get it," Mary told him, and he did so without so much as a word. He handed her the gear, she barked, and he ran like his life depended on it. "Now, let's get this back to those poor men, eh, Allie?" Mary found the workers, and they were so grateful to her, they treated her and her Pokemon to a meal on them. She was appreciative, but the day was still young, and she wanted to find Misty and have a battle. It took some searching up on Route 24, where she caught Lila, the Croconaw. Route 25 saw some battling and the addition of Lava, the Ponyta. Eventually, Mary tracked down Misty, who was finishing up a date, so Mary stayed back a ways until they parted. Misty caught sight of Mary and gasped. "Oh my gosh! Mary Sanderson, it's been so long!" she exclaimed. "I haven't seen you since you beat me ages ago. What are you doing here?" "Well, I've just come from Johto to test my skills in the Kanto gyms again. See if I've still got it," Mary told her. "Say no more! Let's head to the gym. I've caught so many new Pokemon to show you. Do you have any of yours?" Misty was ecstatic since Mary had given her such a good battle before. "I do," Mary sent out Brutus. "I still have my Charizard. He's just as majestic as I remember." They walked back to Cerulean City together and engaged in a battle. Misty's Sandslash was defeated by Rarity after she got a little disoriented by the Pokemon's speed. Her Bellsprout tried to put up a fight against Billy, but the mythical Pokemon was too strong for it. The Blaziken proved to be more of a challenge as it used Blaze Kick and burned Rarity, but her Surf attack was plenty strong and knocked it out. Her Frostlass came in as Misty's last Pokemon, and she got the rematch with Brutus she wanted. It was a one-shot knockout with Lava Plume. Misty shook Mary's hand and grinned. Just as strong as I remember, but far more grown up. It's been years, but I never forgot our first battle, she told her, and gave her the Cascade badge. To go with your other one. I'll treasure it always. It was a pleasure, Misty, Mary told her, and Brutus grinned. As they stepped out of the gym, a rush of wind ran by. It was the false Suicune. Mary hopped on Brutus's back, and he took off like a shot for the cape, following the zooming Pokemon. Eusine beat them there, and he engaged the Pokemon in battle, only to lose in a few turns. Mary approached it calmly, extending her hand. Be careful, Mary! Suicune is powerful! It is not a Suicune, Eusine. Mary touched her hand to its forehead, and the illusion melted away to reveal a grinning Zapdos. It was Mary's from her first trial. Chico, my sweet boy, 'tis thee! Chico flapped his wings and cawed excitedly to see her, but he also gave off the air of challenge. He wanted a battle to see if his old trainer was still worthy of his power. Mary obliged with the help of Brutus and Cynthia. Every ball she threw, Chico kept busting out to continue the fight. He was having a blast, and frankly, so was Mary. Finally, after a long time, click! Zapdos has been registered to your Pokedex, her box said. This is in fact the legendary Pokemon you owned previously. It seems to have waited for you. I missed you too, Chico, Mary said, stroking his spiky feathers. Thank thee for coming back. He rubbed his cheek against hers with a chirp. After stowing Chico in the meadow, Mary decided to travel to Pewter City. The only way they could get there safely was to fly down to Vermilion, then take the Diglett's Cave route. Mary flew down to the city and rested at the center that night, but as she was taking in the night air, she heard a loud, shrill barking. Mary jerked around and saw a Poochyena making a beeline for her. She almost didn't catch the little pup as it leapt at her, then it immediately started licking her face. Are you lost, little one? Mary asked through her giggles when her Pokedex beeped. This is your Pokemon, Shishka Baby, also known as Cabby. Cabby? Mary asked, and the puppy's tail wagged and she barked. Brutus sniffed her and gasped. His reaction confirmed it. What happened to thee? She has been de-evolved to be on par with her surroundings. She is legal for you to catch. It went silent after that. Oh, Cabby, we'll get these sorted out first thing in the morning, Mary promised. Billy hovered over and looked over the Poochyena. Cabby is Mary's? Yes, she was a powerful Mightyena for a year, but apparently things have changed, Mary replied, snuggling her once large dog. Mary can fix her. Mary can do anything, Billy cheered, making her smile. Cabby slept with her all night long, and after some training the next day, she evolved back into Mightyena. That's my girl, Mary beamed as Cabby rushed over to lick her again, tail wagging 1,000 miles an hour. The trek through Diglett's Cave brought aboard a Celio named Joey. Mary and her team made it to Route 2 by midday, and they caught Lola the Lopunny, and once they got into Pewter City, they revived a fossil into Judy the Minun. Mary met an elderly gentleman in the town's park as she let her Pokemon out to play. He admired her love for her Pokemon and gifted her something he'd had for years, a silver wing. This was used to summon Lugia, a legendary Pokemon in Johto. Mary thought about going to see Lugia later on, but right now she wanted to focus on her Pokemon. She loved them so much, and she loved seeing Brutus and Cabby making new friends with her team. Instead of going straight to the next gym, she decided to take her Pokemon out for some training on Route 3, where they caught Dunce the Dunsparce. They battled many trainers, growing stronger by the fight. They came up against a strong trainer with a Vespiquen. The Vespiquen tried to use Destiny Bond on Billy, but Mary knew how dangerous this move was and swapped him out with Brutus. Vespiquen tried to use it again, but Brutus used Fly to kill a turn. Mary was happy to see him out of danger as he prepared to strike, but Vespiquen buzzed up on his level and used destiny bond. Mary's heart shattered as Brutus knocked out the bug type. "No!" she screamed as Brutus inhaled sharply, losing his balance, and he fell to the ground. He looked up at Mary, moaned, then died from the attack. Mary ran forward, slid to her knees, and lifted him in her arms. This wasn't happening. It was not possible. Not Brutus. Not Brutus. It couldn't be. He had been Sarah's partner. Then he had been with Mary since the second gym in her Kanto trial. He had defeated the Pokemon League with her. He went back to Purgatory with her. He was her best friend. Mary held his head against hers as she sobbed painful tears of anguish, moans of grief exploding from her lungs. Billy landed on her shoulder and tried to dry her tears, but it was no use. She was crashing. Everything she had done to become strong in this world was for nothing if Brutus still died. Mary, Brutus will be okay," Billy said. "No, he won't," she snapped. "He's gone. My oldest friend is dead." Mary. Billy was at a loss for words. Suddenly, Brutus glowed brightly, then vanished from Mary's arms. "Where did Brutus go?" "No! No!" she cried. "Brutus, where art thou?" Her Pokedex beeped suddenly. The Charizard, known as Brutus, has perished in this trial. He has been sent back to Purgatory, and you will no longer have access to him until your test is finished. "I do not care to finish thy test!" She pulled the box from her bag. "Send me home, now! My Charizard needs me!" "I cannot oblige. You must finish the test to return home." "Send me back!" "You must finish the test to return home." "He cannot be alone! He needs me! I need him too! I need him!" "Sarah is back in Purgatory. He will not be alone. He is with his first trainer, and will be waiting for you when you succeed in finishing. I am only your guide, Mary, but I believe in you. I believe you will complete this trial." "Oh, I will complete it. If only to get back to my boy," she said angrily. Her grief was overpowering, but her rage at this game's rules was palpable. "I will complete this wretched test if it kills me." And now, previously on episode 11. Mary had returned Rubik's, Flare, and Cobweb Jr. to her team. After the devastating loss of her Charizard, she decided to put the old team back together with the exception of Hercules. Billy had been pulling his weight well, and she wasn't about to relieve him of that. However, Rubik's had noticed Mary wasn't as sugar and spice as she was when he went into the meadow. She was much more serious now. October, Ka, and Brutus's deaths weighed heavily on her heart as she trained everyone to fight against the Pewter City Gym the next day. That night, as she slept, Billy and Rubik's did their best to comfort her, and she welcomed their affection. And yet, she was afraid to give in to their warmth. The following morning, she and her team went to face Brock. The gym trainers gave her a run for her money, but her team came out on top. "I should have expected nothing less from you, Mary," Brock chuckled as she approached him. "You're as good a trainer as ever, but I've gotten better too since we last fought. I've got a new team, just itching to give you a fight you'll never forget." I'm ready when you are," Mary almost stammered, but she hid her nerves. "All right, let's go, Noctowl." Brock sent out a flying type. "Rubik's, give it thine all." Mary sent in her Togekiss. Rubik's was thrilled to be back in action with Mary, and he proved it with powerful attacks that beat down the Noctowl. However, Noctowl was no slouch, getting in a fair amount of damage itself. Eventually, Rubik's took it out, and Brock sent in Celio. Mary knew Rubik's Azorasphere would give him the advantage, but the ice typing of Celio was too dangerous a risk to take, so she switched him out for Billy. Billy's psychic attacks were unstoppable, and his sheer force stopped the Celio in its tracks. "I see you've got a new legendary partner, Mary," Brock said with a smirk. "It figures after Rayquaza another would find you. But you're not the only one with the power of a legend on their side. Dialga! Give them everything you've got!" Mary's heart leapt into her throat as the mighty deity burst onto the field. She held up her Pokedex in an attempt to learn more. Dialga, a legendary Pokemon. This Pokemon is the deity of time and has a signature move called Roar of Time that your Garchomp managed to learn. It bears the Steel and Dragon typing. Steel and Dragon, Mary thought to herself. Odds are it will have some kind of ground move to placate its own weakness to it, so Flare is of no use. Rubix is still hurt. Cobweb Jr. can't hit him very hard. Billy can't either. Rarity is our safest bet for now. Mary called Billy back and sent in her Milotic. As predicted, Dialga used Earth Power, which did not hurt Rarity very much. She used Surf on her foe, but it barely made a dent. Mary had to heal her Milotic, but Brock surprised her with a bait-and-switch and sent in his Parasect in Dialga's place. Mary realized what she needed to do in order to beat the legendary when it inevitably came back. Cynthia is my only hope here. Even though she is weak to the dragon typing, her ground typing will add a lot of resistance, plus her speed. Mary withdrew Rarity. Go, Cynthia! Mary's Garchomp blasted into action against the Parasect, swiftly dodging its move. She struck with Dragon Claw, knocking it out, but the ability Effect Spore caused Cynthia to fall asleep as Dialga was brought back in. Mary used a full heal antidote on her Garchomp as Dialga struck with Flash Cannon. Cynthia endured it strongly. Cynthia, use Dig, quickly! Mary called, her confidence starting to come back a little. Cynthia dug her way under the gym arena as Dialga let loose another flash cannon that missed. Cynthia struck from below and plunged the great deity into red health. All it would take was one more hit, and as Cynthia moved in for Dragon Claw, Brock healed Dialga. Cynthia struck hard enough that Dig could do it. She looked back at Mary and grinned a toothy grin, receiving a nod in return. Dig one more time, Mary called. Cynthia dove under the ground, narrowly missing the flash cannon. She broke through, striking Dialga, sending it back to red, but Mary felt a sharp chill shoot up her spine as she saw Brock smirking. Dialga had lived on 2 health points. We were ready this time. Dialga, unleash flash cannon! Dialga had been charging up. It blasted Flash Cannon right into Cynthia's body at close range, and it came off at critical power. Mary screamed as her Garchomp was thrown through the air, landed at her feet, and breathed her last. Mary fell to her knees, a cold sweat breaking out all over her body as she cradled Cynthia in her arms. Not again! Not so soon! Rubix burst back into the battle without a second thought and shot Aurasphere right into the Dialga, and it fell with a loud thud. He was enraged, and he could feel the pain from his trainer. Brock wasn't even finished yet. His Roserade came in, and Rubix looked to Mary for an order, but she was just too stunned. Rubix decided to handle this himself and ordered to end this quickly so his trainer could grieve. His first move was Air Slash, and it slammed so hard into Roserade it was almost a one-hit knockout. Brock healed his Roserade, but Rubix was so fast he hit twice with Air Slash and ended the battle before Mary even looked up from her Garchomp. Rubix flew around Brock, snatched the boulder badge from its pedestal, flew over to Mary, and placed it on Cynthia's chest. She had earned it. Mary reached out to Rubix and stroked his feathers, tears still swimming in her eyes. She picked up the badge, pinned it to her cloak, returned Cynthia's body to her ball, and left the gym with Rubix flying beside her. Brock was stunned at how different this battle with Mary Sanderson was this time. She said her goodbyes to Cynthia and brought Allie back onto the team. She really didn't have a better option. Not even Cabby. Mary decided to explore Viridian Forest to get her mind off of things, and there she caught Hydra, the Dodrio. She walked through Viridian City, then went to Route 1. She had the slightest bit of hope that maybe by visiting the place where this all started, things would turn around for her. On Route 1, Mary gasped as she ran into a Gibble, the baby form of Cynthia. The young dragon was caught and named Smallfang. Mary almost put him on the team, but decided to wait. When she reached Pallet Town, she searched high and low to see if there was any sign of her old starter. She missed Broomy now more than ever. Alas, there was no trace of the Lord of the Skies. Mary spent some time here and rescued a hoot-hoot from the water, naming it Hooty. She remembered that Cinnabar Island wasn't too far away from Pallet, so she decided to go there next. She rode Rarity along Route 21, catching a quagsire named Chandler along the way. It took all day, but she made it to Cinnabar and caught a Pidgey named Winona, who had been stranded on a rock in the middle of the ocean. Mary gasped when she saw the state of the island. The only thing left standing was the Pokemon Center. When she inquired with the nurse at the center about what happened, she was told that the volcano erupted several years ago, destroying everything. Only recently had the Pokemon Center been rebuilt. As Mary laid in bed that night, she imagined what it must have been like for the residents of Cinnabar to suddenly lose everything. It was a feeling unlike any other, and one she had experienced a few times in her life. It was a horrible feeling.
"Mary, are you sleeping?"
Billy asked quietly. "Not yet," she replied. Billy climbed up on her chest and sat down.
"Mary is sad again."
"Yes, I am," she responded. He laid down on his stomach and looked at her.
"Cynthia would not want Mary feeling sad. Billy does not want Mary to feel sad."
"I don't want to feel sad either," she told him, then swallowed. "But it's not as easy to fight such feelings as wishing them away."
"But Billy is a wish-giver," her Jirachi told her. "If Mary wishes to feel happy, Billy can make her feel happy."
"You already do that without a wish." Mary rubbed his face lovingly. "Thou art my dearest companion on this journey. Every time we speak, I heal a little more."
"Billy is glad. Billy loves Mary very much," he said, then let out a yawn.
"So sleepy." He fell asleep on top of her. She wrapped her arms around him. "I love you too," she whispered, realizing for the first time in a long time she did love something apart from her sisters. As long as she had Billy, things would be all right. Before leaving the next day, Mary checked her map to see where she hadn't been yet. Mary realized she'd actually skipped Celadon City, so that's where she was heading next. She flew to Route 7 just outside of the city and caught Rexy the Rampardos. Inside Celadon, she caught Dory the Finneon, and on Route 16 she claimed a Salamence. The Salamence shared the same typing as Broomy. Maybe this Pokemon could be their savior, and that became his name. She rested at the center and fed her Pokemon, Billy sitting on her lap and Rubik's by her side. She stroked her Togekiss's head lovingly. "I never did thank you for defeating Brock by thyself, Rubik's. You are strong and wise, and I am grateful to have you by my side." Rubik's rubbed his head on her shoulder happily. After their lunch, they made their way to Celadon City Gym. It was not an easy fight to get to the gym leader, but everyone fought hard, Allie more so than the others. She was proving why she got to rejoin the team. Erica was sitting amongst the flowers with some of the other trainers in the gym. She looked up at Mary and grinned. "Oh my goodness! Serge said you'd be here sometime, Mary. I'm so happy you've come for another fight." "Thank you, Erica." Mary felt herself starting to get nervous. She had to remain calm. Billy hugged her shoulder.
"Mary will do fine," he said.
"Shall we get started?" Erica asked her, and Mary nodded. "I've been preparing a new team just for you. I'll show you how strong I've gotten if you show me how far you've come." The first Pokemon Erica sent in was Krogunk. Mary sent in Cobweb Jr. to use extra sensory, which knocked out the poison type quickly. Erica sent in Azelf, which caused Mary to do a double take. "Wait, was this not Surge's Pokemon?" she asked. "Yeah, Azelf was Surge's, but we made a trade for one of my Pokemon. I was there when he caught Azzy, but Azzy always liked me better. I warn you, he's not looking to lose again," Erica said smugly. "Psychic is super effective to poison," Mary recalled. She didn't have a dark type who could fight it easily, but Flare did have a dark type move. "Flare, use Bite!" "Azzy, extrasensory!" Azelf was much faster than Flare, and the move hit her so hard it plunged her into red. Flare hit Azelf with Bite, but it remained in the low point of green health. Flare could not take another hit, even with heal stalling. She had to switch out. But with who?
"Mary, Billy can fight. Billy's type resists Psychic by a lot,"
Billy volunteered. "Are you sure?" she asked him nervously. Billy fist pumped.
"Billy can do it."
"All right. Flare, switch with Billy." Flare ran back to Mary's side as Billy floated onto the field. It was a psychic legendary showdown. Back and forth the two tiny titans fought and dealt blows. Mary had to heal Billy once or twice. She was beginning to breathe faster, her heart racing. But Billy never backed down. His spirit was untouchable as he fought with every ounce of power he possessed. He got in a couple of free hits as Azelf used Nasty Plot to boost its special attack, then used Future Sight. Future Sight would hit after 2 turns and deal extra damage. Billy endured the hit from Future Sight, and Erica had to heal Azelf. The struggle continued as Azelf set up another Future Sight, this time with a boosted special attack. Billy turned to Mary, panting, and gave her a smile. He was proud of how hard he was fighting. Mary decided to heal him again, and he gave her a hug before flying back into battle. As soon as he left her arms, Mary felt that unmistakable chill strike her spine. Azelf unleashed extrasensory, striking Billy, and he stood tall until Future Sight came crashing down on him. Billy was pummeled by powerful psychic energy and thrown backwards. Mary screamed, running to catch him, and she did just before hitting the floor on her knees hard. No, Billy, she stammered. He looked up at her, beaten and bruised, but still smiling. Billy, no!
Billy is so sleepy, he muttered. Will Mary rock Billy to sleep?
No, please, do not close thine eyes. Please, Please do not leave me too. Please, she begged him.
So sleepy,
he muttered, his eyes beginning to close.
Mary. Billy loves Mary.
His eyes closed, and he went limp in her arms. Sobbing, she held him close to her chest as a mysterious power enveloped him. In but a few moments, Billy was entombed in a crystal-laden rock. Mary's cries of anguish only worsened as Allie burst from her ball angrily. Allie, without hesitation, charged for an attack, but Azelf used extrasensory again and brought down the shiny ambipom. Mary saw her fall and cried out for her beloved friend. She had rescued her from Team Rocket, and now she was gone too in the blink of an eye. Rubix was the next Pokemon to burst onto the field. His rage at losing 2 valuable friends, and even more so, the agony of his trainer, fueled him. He charged with Air Slash, but met with extrasensory and was blasted back down right next to Mary. No! Rubix! No, not you too! She was in a panic as she tried to cradle both the entombed Billy and Rubix at the same time, tears streaming down her face. Rubix reached up with his wing and wiped her eyes. He smiled at her, then passed away. No! Azzy, I think you may have gone too far, Erica gulped. Azelf looked back at her proudly. He was happy to be winning. Mary, we can stop. Rarity, drown that pixie with surf now. Mary flung her Milotic's ball and the sea serpent glided onto the field. Both trainer and Pokemon were fueled by grief. Azelf used extrasensory again. Mary braced herself, but Rarity survived. She flinched from the attack, so Mary had to heal. Erica had lost control of Azelf, and it set up Future Sight again. Mary and Rarity locked eyes. They wanted vengeance. Hydro Pump! Do not let up! Mary shouted. Azelf blasted her with extrasensory again, plunging her into red health. Mary couldn't breathe until Rarity let out a loud cry and plowed Azelf with Hydro Pump. The small legendary slammed into the wall, cried out in pain, but Rarity did not let up. Mary did not stop her. Azelf wailed from the force of the water, spluttering and coughing as liquid filled its lungs. Stop, please! Erica begged Mary. You'll kill Azzy! He killed 3 of my Pokemon, she responded coldly. Mary, please, I'm sorry, I couldn't control him, but please call off your Milotic, Erica pleaded. The battle is not over yet. You defeated Azelf. Let him go. Mary did not call her off. Mary, please do not seek revenge. Why not? She asked through her tears. Because you're a better trainer than this, and your Pokemon would not want you to do it, Erica said. Mary looked at the struggling Azelf and suddenly saw Billy's face. Rarity enough, she ordered. Rarity stopped and Azelf hit the ground, defeated. It heaved water from its lungs as Erica picked it up and hugged it close. The grief washed over Mary again, but she fought through it. Continue the battle, Erica. Right. the gym leader stuttered. Pikachu was her next Pokemon, and Cobweb Jr. took a Thunder, then the Future Sight attack that had been set up. He stood through the pain and welcomed Mary's healing. Then he fought Psychic with Psychic. Extrasensory! His power struck the Pikachu twice and knocked it out. Her last Pokemon was another legendary called Shaman. Mary healed Flare, who was standing by her side, growling and stamping her paws in impatience. As soon as the last spritz of potion was done, Flare charged into the fight as Cobweb Jr. stalked back beside Rarity. Flare unleashed Heat Wave and plunged it down to yellow health. Erica healed her Pokemon, but Flare did not let up. She chomped on the grass type with Fire Fang over and over, even when Erica had to heal again. Finally, she picked it up in her flaming jaws, bit down, and flung it across the room. Shaman was all right, just scorched. The battle was over. Mary won the fight, but she lost something far more important. Erica gave her the rainbow badge, and Mary barely acknowledged it by pinning it to her cloak. "I'm sorry," Erica apologized. "Get that Azelf under control," she told her. Mary returned Allie and Rubik's bodies to their Pokeballs. She still cradled Billy in his crystal tomb. "Or you may not have someone as merciful as me next time." She left the gym, returned to the Pokemon Center, and accessed the graves in the PC. It hurt to place Allie's body inside. Pain stabbed her gut when she had to say goodbye to Rubik's. But she felt everything inside her break when she looked at the sort of cocoon covering Billy. Mary fell to her knees again and started crying right in front of the PC portal. It was over. Everything was over. She grabbed her Pokedex. "I quit," she told it. "I give up. I cannot do this." "Are you sure you want to quit?" it asked. "Yes, I want to quit." "You will be forced to start over if you quit now." "What?" "You have no choice but to complete this test. You may start over if you wish." Mary looked at her 3 remaining Pokemon. Rarity put everything on the line for her to win that battle. Cobweb Jr. never gave up when the going got tough, and he lost so many friends. Flare was Mary's loyal companion, and she had battled her heart out. These 3 were still ready to fight for her, even though they were in just as much pain. Flare walked up and rubbed her head on Mary's shoulder. "All right, Flare. I'll do it. We'll keep fighting," Mary said. "I will not quit. Billy would never want me to quit. Nor would Rubik's or Allie." She decided to go hunt a legendary in the Seafoam Islands. She brought on Chico, Krabby, and Reptar for the time being. She wasn't sure if she was going to use them permanently or not, but having Cabby by her side really helped her feel the slightest bit better. As she went to fly for the islands, she broke down again, feeling the emptiness on her shoulder without Billy. She eventually got hold of herself and took off. She caught a Lairon in Seafoam Islands and named him Tober in honor of her Aggron. When she found the Articuno, she felt the familiar, hollow feeling she felt in the power plant back during her first trial. The legendary was Registeel. The Registeel had been owned by Winifred, and it wanted nothing to do with her. So much so that it ended up killing Reptar to resist being caught. Mary had Rarity knock it out, and she left the islands to bury Reptar. Mary returned to Saffron City to choose her new team members, and they needed to be ruthless. There was no mercy from this point onwards. She chose Savior, Sniffles, and Wynot. After some hardcore training, Sniffles evolved into Piloswine, and Wynot evolved into Wobbuffet. Savior was ferocious, Sniffles was icy, and Wynot was the perfect shield. Mary refused to get attached to them. She worried they wouldn't last long. She had 3 more gems and another legendary Pokemon to hunt, but she was terrified of what was to come, and without Billy to comfort her, she just wanted to survive. And now. Previously on episode 12. Mary approached the Saffron City gym and stood frozen outside of its doors. She hadn't felt so alone since... ever. There was no Brutus, no Billy, no sisters to bolster her shattered confidence. Suddenly, a nose pressed against her back. Flare gave her a nudge. Mary's hand shook too much to reach out and pet her Arcanine. Flare placed her face in Mary's hand herself, giving her the warmth she needed. Together they walked into the gym and laid waste to the trainers there. Well, really, it was Why Not doing the heavy hitting. His special attacks allowed him to absorb the shock from enemy attacks and fire it back at double the power. Why Not was the most amazing shield Mary could have asked for to protect her Pokemon. Why Not was enjoying himself as he battled through the trainers, saluting Mary after each victory. She wanted to hug and congratulate him, but she refused to let herself get attached. She did, however, nod back to him and give a soft clap. This pleased him greatly. They reached Sabrina with little difficulty, but the gym leader scrutinized her in a way Mary wasn't expecting. A broken spirit, confidence shattered like glass, and a wall built around the heart you were growing. This is not the Mary Sanderson I battled a year ago. Only Sabrina was aware of how much real time had passed since Mary had stood before her. Then battle the one that stands before thee now, Mary requested. No, I do not fancy a battle with one so broken. You are not the trainer that wielded the mighty Rayquaza. You are not the trainer that cared so deeply for her Pokemon. She wept when they died. I'm through weeping, Mary snapped at her. I will not allow myself to care for any more of these creatures. I've lost too many. Loss is part of life. You have died 3 times, taken the lives of others. Why does the loss of these Pokemon affect you so? I don't know. I do. You are not as heartless as you believe you are. It is why you fought Team Rocket. It is why you wept uncontrollably when your Jirachi died, and why you want so badly to get back to your sisters. So even if you close yourself off, even when you inevitably lose another Pokemon, your heart beats with the emotion of love. Now show me if you can still feel it, and defeat me! Sabrina sent out her Miltank. Why not? Prepare for battle! Mary sent in her Wobbuffet. Miltank tried to lower Why Not's attack stat, and his Whirlpool attack missed. Miltank struck with Zen Headbutt, and this time Why Not's Whirlpool hit. Now he planted his feet as Zen Headbutt smashed into him. Counter! Mary commanded. Why Not rebounded the attack at double the damage it did to him, hurting the Miltank a little bit. Since her Wobbuffet was taking damage from a not very effective attack, his power wasn't hitting back much harder. But he did manage to chip away at the normal type after it healed once. Why Not panted after the first foe was defeated, but Mary kept him in battle. Tauros was the next Pokemon up to fight, and it struck hard with Takedown, plunging Why Not into yellow health. Both Mary and Why Not smirked at the same time. Counter again! Mary ordered him. The power that Why Not unleashed knocked out the Tauros in a single hit. Mary kept her Wobbuffet in play as the final opponent Jigglypuff took the field. Why Not rebounded Double Edge, but it wasn't strong enough to take it out. What was worse, the ability Cute Charm activated, causing Why Not to fall in love with the Jigglypuff. Mary had to switch, and she sent in her Piloswine called Sniffles. Sniffles was a girl and therefore unaffected by the female Jigglypuff's ability. Sniffles took a hit, but she returned the favor with Ice Shard and won the gym battle. Mary's heart raced. Was it true? Had she just defeated a gym leader without a loss? She hadn't been able to pull off such a feat since the 7th Johto gym. Overwhelmed, she ran to Sniffles and hugged her, causing the Piloswine to jump from shock. Why Not burst back out of his ball, and Mary hugged him tightly, kissing the top of his head. Why Not blushed brightly and mumbled to himself. He was so happy his trainer was proud of him. Well done, both of you! Thou hast done beautifully, especially thee, Why Not? Mary said, then realized what she was doing. Before she could put both of them back in their Pokeballs, Sabrina tapped her on the shoulder. You were so lost during that battle that when victory came, it broke that lock on your heart. You love your Pokemon and should not be afraid to show it. Losses will come. Those we love will leave us, but they're never far from our hearts. Do not close yours off, or I will take back this marsh badge, Sabrina told her sternly, handing over her 6th badge. Spend some time with Wobbuffet and Piloswine. Let them know you welcome their help and their affection. Do that, and your future battles will see victory, even through another loss. Sabrina, Mary looked at the bright eyes of her Pokemon and swallowed hard. I will. Good. Now go pursue something to restore your confidence. The remaining road will not be an easy one. Mary took that as a sign to go back to Johto to the Whirl Islands where there was rumored to be a legendary Pokemon. Her Silverwing was found there, and perhaps it would lead her to a new friend, or an old one. On the ship back to Olivine City, Mary spent time with her 6 Pokemon in her stateroom. She apologized for being so cold, explaining to the 3 new team members what had happened. She promised she would try to do better, but she couldn't promise it would be quick. Sleeping wasn't easy without Billy in her arms or Rubik's behind her knees, but Mary did get in a few hours of rest before the ship docked. She rode on Rarity's back to the Whirl Islands where she caught Urchin the Kingdra. Using the scent of the Silverwing, Mary sniffed her way through the dark labyrinth of the caves. When she arrived, she saw a great legendary beast known as Lugia, but the power it gave off was fiery and hard as nails. She approached the creature, and the illusion faded away to reveal a great, fiery behemoth. Heatran, a legendary steel and fire-type Pokemon. It can melt anything it touches if it sets its mind to it, said her Pokédex. Mary gulped, but took a deep breath and walked forward. Heatran, I request a battle with thee. If I weaken thee enough, please consider joining my team, Mary said with a bow. Heatran obliged, but it fought with every fiber of its being. Mary had Rarity do battle with the great beast, and she eventually brought it down to red. Mary started throwing every Pokeball in her arsenal, but Heatran broke out of and melted each one. At one point, a ball shook 3 times, but it still broke out. In all her time, the only legendary Pokemon Mary had failed to catch was Registeel, and that is only because it was desperate to be Winifred's Pokemon alone. Heatran was Mary's toughest legendary encounter yet, but she kept trying. Eventually, Heatran was worn down so much he ran out of attacking power and used the move Struggle, knocking himself out and vanishing. Mary dropped to her knees, soaked in sweat from the heat the legendary creature had been radiating, but even more so from her desperation to catch it. She failed. She never failed to catch a legendary before. She had knocked out Registeel both times. This stung, but something else was burning inside of her. Confidence. No one had died in this fight, so maybe, just maybe, she could survive the rest of this trial. Mary needed to find out where Cinnabar Gym was relocated to, if it was relocated, and if not, who the gym leader for the 7th gym was now. She hopped a ship back to Vermilion and flew for the island. When she landed, she wasn't alone. Her jaw dropped when the young man turned around and smiled at her. As I live and breathe, Mary Sanderson has come back to Kanto. Jeffrey, she growled lowly. He held up his hands. Easy! I know we left things pretty rotten, and I treated you poorly as my rival. But I have to admit, when you offered your hand to me and pulled me back to my feet after our battle for the title of champion, I realized where I went wrong. I've come a long way since then, Mary. Deflated the ego, let go of the past, but used it as a building block for my future. So, I have to say thank you for beating the stuffing out of me all those years ago. Well, you're welcome. Mary was surprised that such a small action had such a large impact on her old rival. He was much different now. She relaxed a bit. Hast thou been faring well in recent years? Actually, yeah. When you left, I had to take back over as champion. I was in the position for about a year when this young man about my age called Red came through the league. He unseated me with hardly an effort. Reminded me of you, really. I was actually grateful. Had other things I wanted to do with my life apart from running the league. I had to be in charge of both Kanto and Johto leagues since they both took place at the plateau. Where did this Red go? Mary asked him. For he was not the champion I fought after my journey through Johto. He went to a place called Mount Silver to train about 5 years ago, and we haven't heard a word out of him since, Jeffrey told her. He puzzled for a moment. Mount Silver is the most dangerous area in Johto and Kanto. Powerful Pokemon and treacherous terrain are your only friends. The only other person around is Nurse Joy at the Pokemon Center. Only trainers with 16 badges are permitted to go there now since Champion Red disappeared. I see. Mary opened her cloak and looked at her badges nervously. She had 14. Was this what her Kanto journey was leading to? Mount Silver? Hey, wow! You have 14 badges! Jeffrey gasped. 2 more and you'll accomplish something very few trainers have. I take it you came here seeking out Blaine's badge. Yes, that's exactly why I came here. Mary replied. How didst thou— When you're the 8th gym leader, you have to check in on your colleagues, Geoffrey revealed, and Mary's eyes widened. I came to help rebuild his gym. Right now, he's over in the Seafoam Islands. Be sure to tell him to get back over here so he can get to work soon. I will, Mary stammered, still taken aback by Geoffrey's announcement. He smiled at her. And Mary, when you're finished with him, you and I are going to have a rematch unlike any other at my gym. Don't disappoint me. He offered his hand to shake, and she took it. I won't, she promised. Mary surfed over to the Seafoam Islands, on Rarity's back, where she found Blaine's gym at the top of the cavern. The foes inside were not an easy challenge, but relying on her Pokemon in the way she had before the tragedies was working. They approached Blaine together, and he smiled. Mary Sanderson, Sabrina told me you'd be on your way over, he said. Are you ready for a battle? I need to see if you deserve another volcano badge. I'm ready, she nodded, her nerves creeping up on her again. Gastrodon was his first choice, so Mary sent in Cobweb Jr. to combat it. Gastrodon set up Rain Dance, boosting the power of water moves, and causing a rainstorm inside. Cobweb's Razor Leaf hit so hard, Gastrodon fainted in a single turn. Blaine's Staraptor flew into the fight next, and Mary chose to counter, for the first time, with Savior, her Salamence. Staraptor charged up Brave Bird, swooped, and smashed into her dragon at critical power, killing him in one hit. Mary cursed loudly as she returned his body to his Pokeball. She truly believed he could have carried them to the end of this trial, but now he would never get the chance. Staraptor took a lot of recoil damage, but Mary was seeing red. There was only one way to protect her Pokemon, so she sent in Why-Not. Brave Bird again! Blaine ordered his Pokemon. Staraptor swooped in for Why-Not. Hold firm, Why-Not! Mary commanded. Charge your power! Staraptor smashed into Why-Not, and he took so much damage his health went into yellow, but he stood tall. Counter! Mary called. Why-Not unleashed his now stored up damage at twice the power and knocked out the flying type. His eyes were angry. He lost a brother. He would lose no more. As the rain still pounded down on their heads, Mary felt a change in her. She wasn't angry at the world. She was sad for Savior's loss, but her determination burned bright, as it had the day she chose Broomy to be her first Pokemon. She was always going to be the trainer who wielded Rayquaza, and no one could take that from her. Shuckle was Blaine's last Pokemon, and Mary kept her Wobbuffet in battle. It set up a few stat-changing moves, during which Mary healed Why-Not to full health. She shared a strong nod with him, as Shuckle used Power Trick to enhance its attack and defense stats, massively boosting its power. It was a risky move, but they had to do it. Shuckle, use Bug Bite! Blaine commanded. Why-Not? Hold thy ground and charge up your power, Mary ordered. Why-Not planted his feet and waited for the blow. Shuckle's super effective bug-type attack slammed into Why-Not so strongly, Mary's heart was in her throat. She watched the gym's screen that calculated damage, showing Why-Not's health bar draining quickly. Green, yellow, red, and at 7 health points, the damage stopped. It was time. Why not use counter? She yelled strongly. It was as if a bomb went off when Why Not unleashed the move at double the attack strength. Having taken damage to the majority of his health, which rang at 273, he had taken 266 in damage. He fired it back to deal a whopping 532 damage, which obliterated the Shuckle, winning Mary the battle and avenging Savior's death. Mary ran forward at top speed and snatched her new legendary Pokemon, Why Not the Wobbuffet, in her arms for the biggest hug the creature had ever received. He hugged her back, tears streaming down his face, as she cried too. Both were crying for their friend's loss and the joy of winning. Blaine came forward, apologized for the loss of her Salamence, and presented her with the Volcano Badge. Your Wobbuffet is well-trained, well-loved, and extremely powerful. Keep up the good work, Blaine encouraged them. Mary nodded to him and pinned the badge to her cloak. One more to go. She returned to Saffron City's Pokemon Center and laid her Salamence to rest. She didn't know who to replace him with, but she didn't have to make the choice. A Pokeball appeared in her hand, crackling with electricity. She opened it, and Chico, her Zapdos, flapped his wings in determination. He wanted his chance at battle. He wanted to be with Mary so badly he had come back for her. It was his turn. Mary hugged him and accepted his help. That night, as she tried to go to sleep to no avail, while the others slept on the floor or the top bunk, she felt movement next to her. Why Not had climbed into bed behind her back and laid down to sleep. Mary, a smile on her face, turned over and held his hand all night, sleeping peacefully. And now, previously on episode 13. Mary awoke with a new outlook on her journey and got to training. Chico needed to reach the rest of the team's levels, and he put in the work. Mary had been without Billy for several days now, but she had forgotten what it was like to have a legendary Pokemon on her side. Her Zapdos was magnificent, and he was so happy to finally get his chance to fight at Mary's side. He'd wanted to since he joined her the first time. Mary showed him plenty of affection, and he returned it in kind. Everyone trained hard, but no one was happier seeing Mary back to her old self than Flare. She sat at her trainer's side, panting happily as her friends hyped Chico up for his first and their final gym battle. Mary knew what was at stake, her 8th badge and a rematch with Jeffrey. She wasn't losing to him, and not a single Pokemon would die in this last and most crucial gym battle if she had anything to say about it. They set out the following day, Mary on the back of Chico, who insisted he carry her. She felt as happy as she had when Broomy had carried her on his back a year ago. She missed him terribly. Chico flew straight and true to Viridian City, landing in front of the gym. Mary took a deep breath, touched her empty shoulder, remembered the good times, and walked inside. Her team tore through the gym's trainers mercilessly, and it wasn't long before Mary stood in front of a smirking Jeffrey. "Well, it's been a long time since we stood against each other like this. I've been looking forward to it since we ran into each other a few days ago," he said. "As have I," Mary replied. "I'll have thy badge before the afternoon." "Still think you've got what it takes to beat me, do ya? I've grown a lot since we last battled. You're looking at a former champion and current strongest gym leader in Kanto." "Who has lost to me every time we battled," Mary reminded him. "And I want to keep that pattern alive and well." "Then let's cut the chit-chat and get to the main event. Go, Machamp!" Jeffrey sent in his first Pokemon. "Chico, spread thy wings and take flight!" Mary sent in her Zapdos. "Of course, you still have a legendary Pokemon." "You expect anything less from me?" "Absolutely not," Jeffrey smirked. "Use Scary Face!" "Chico, use Fly!" Chico rocketed out of the way of Machamp's attempt to lower his speed, then struck hard, plunging it into the red. He lost some of his speed on the rebound, but Jeffrey had to heal his Machamp. Chico struck with Fly again, took a cross chop, then ended the round with Discharge. Next was a Cloyster that was a half-water, half-ice type. Mary wanted to switch, but Chico insisted he stay in. Mary knew his discharge was strong, so she let him stay regardless of the lowered speed. Cloyster set up spikes on the field, so if Mary switched out, the entering Pokemon would sustain damage. Now Chico really had to carry his weight to protect the others. He let loose a powerful discharge and Cloyster fainted. Staryu came in next and met the same fate. Chico was 3 for 3 when a Geodude came in. Mary just could not take the risk. "Chico, come back!" She withdrew her Zapdos. "Rarity, 'tis up to thee!" Her Milotic took some damage from the spikes, and Geodude struck with Double Edge. But Rarity stuck it out and knocked out the Rock type with Surf. Jeffrey sent in Feraligatr, and Mary sent Chico back in to take on another Water type. Feraligatr struck at critical power with Thrash, and Mary felt her heart leap into her throat as Chico hit the ground. She held her breath as Jeffrey prepared to gloat when her Zapdos pushed himself back to his feet and let out a great cry. Mary gasped and grinned brightly, then hurriedly called him in for a healing turn. Feraligatr was locked into Thrash, and this time it hit less strongly. "Chico, use Discharge!" Mary ordered. Chico zapped the Water type and brought down his opponent to red. Feraligatr hit him again, but Chico was too fast, and he finished the job. Jeffrey's last Pokemon was a Floatzel, and Mary knew they had this in the bag. Jeffrey locked eyes with her, and they could practically hear what the other one was thinking. Floatzel, use Crunch! Chico, discharge at full strength! Mary and Jeffrey looked at each other in the eyes again, and he nodded to her with a soft smile. Floatzel bit down on Chico's wing right as he let loose a ton of electricity. Floatzel lost its grip and fell to the floor. Chico spread his wings and let out a victorious battle cry. Mary cheered loudly and ran forward to hug her Zapdos tightly. Chico put his wings around her and crowed happily. Mary was so proud of him, tears sparkling in her eyes, and she stroked his feathers. With a little help from Rarity, Chico had carried them to their final gym victory. Jeffrey walked over to them, chuckling to himself. I really shouldn't have expected a different outcome. You're as strong as you've always been, with twice the skill, he said, and handed over her 8th badge. She pinned it to her cloak, her 16th and final badge. You earned that. Thank you, Jeffrey, for a great battle, and a fun one at that. Likewise. Thanks for coming back again. He smiled and they shook hands. Mary got a call on her Pokegear from Professor Oak saying he had something for her. She walked down to Pallet Town and got the HM for Rock Climb from him, which Flair learned. Mary was also granted permission to go to Mount Silver whenever she was ready. She didn't feel like she was and decided to check her map for any other place she hadn't been and found Mount Moon and Cerulean Cave. She set off for Pewter City and hurried over to Mount Moon where she caught Chaos, the Mismagius. Cerulean City wasn't far, so she made the walk and spent the night at the Pokemon Center pampering her Pokemon, especially the very tired Chico. She slept peacefully with Wynot by her side, and the next morning she walked into the cave and caught Pinesaw, the Pineco. It was dark, but she used her tracking powers to guide her way through the cavern. She smelled something powerful. As she walked, she picked up a few useful items, including a charm called a Lucky Egg, and a discarded Master Ball. This Master Ball was a sign of good things to come. She just knew it. What she found at the end of the cave was a legendary Pokemon called Regigigas. She tried her best to capture the beast, coming close every few Pokeballs, but something told her to keep the Master Ball for something else. Eventually, Regigigas wore itself out like Heatran had, and fainted. Mary was a little disheartened when her Pokedex picked up a powerful entity near the nearby power plant. It was nightfall by the time she got out of the cage and rode Rarity down to the plant. What looked like another Zapdos revealed itself to be a Dialga. Mary remembered this thing was what killed Cynthia. But this wasn't the same Dialga. It had a different smell. It smelled kinder. Her Pokedex told her that Sarah had once caught his counterpart Palkia on her journey through Johto. Mary called on Cobweb Jr. to use Stun Spore, and then Wynot to use Mirror Coat to plunge the legendary into red health. Before throwing her Pokeball, Mary smiled at him. Dialga, I mean thee no harm, despite our battle. I seek thee as a friend. Thy other half, Palkia, made friends with my own little sister. I wish to be friends with thee. I once had a friend in the mighty Rayquaza, and I miss him so. Just from our short battle, I can feel that thou art also mighty, but with a soft heart. Now when I throw my Pokeballs, consider joining me, and I'll keep you well. She threw her first Dusk Ball, and Dialga went inside. 1 shake, 2 shakes, 3 shakes, click! Dialga has been registered to your Pokedex, her encyclopedia beeped. Kronos, you will not be sorry, Mary promised. I'm taking thee with me to Mount Silver. And that's just what she did. She gave Sniffles a hug and put her in the meadow before adding Kronos to the team. Together, they hiked to Mount Silver from Victory Road's gate as soon as dawn broke. She caught a Cherubi named Warlock, and inside the cave, she caught Slash the Zangoose. There was another spike in energy, and Mary followed it to a Moltres. At first, the cry it let out sent her heart into a rush as it sounded like Broomy, but when the illusion faded, it revealed a huge whale. Kyogre, the deity of the sea, a water type. It can cause storms that raises sea levels. Let's make this one quick, Mary said and pulled out the Master Ball. Welcome to the team, Nemo! She threw the ball and caught the legendary Pokemon. Kyogre has been registered to your Pokedex, beeped her encyclopedia. That is the last encounter you will receive on this journey. Hike to the top and face your final challenge. Not until we've all trained up, Mary said and looked at her team with a sentimental smile. It was almost over. And now, the finale. Previously on the finale of Mary Sanderson Plays Pokemon HeartGold. Mary laid under the stars, leaned against Kronos with Flare by her side. Cobweb Jr. slept by Kronos' head, and Chico huddled up on the spines of his fellow legendary's back. Rarity floated in the pond, sleeping peacefully, while Wynot slept right against Mary. She stared at the stars, cradling the crystal cocoon that was once Billy. She missed him so much, and she hoped this final challenge might reverse his death. She wanted to take him home with her to Purgatory. He was her confidant, her best friend. Kronos had tried to reverse time on the cocoon, but it didn't work. She had bonded closely with Dialga and all of her other teammates, and that was why this upcoming battle was terrifying. She couldn't lose anyone else. Flare huddled up to her, and Mary brushed her fur with her fingers, eventually giving way to sleep. The hike up the mountain began at dawn, and it was the toughest trek Mary had ever endured. The farther up she went, the colder it got. She wrapped her cloak around her as far as she could, hood nearly covering her face as the wind and snow blew around her. Her teeth chattered as she stumbled up the rocky mountain. Behind her, Flare pushed her forward if she started to slip. At one point, Mary was so exhausted she held onto Arcanine's fur and used Flare's weight to keep her upright. The air was getting thinner, and Mary found it hard to breathe, but she kept fighting through the elements. Under her arm, she carried the cocoon. It took all day, and by nightfall, she reached the peak. She wanted to sweat, but every time she did, it froze. At the peak, she saw a warm fire under a cliff out of the wind, and she breathed a sigh of relief. Flare helped her over to the fire, and Mary sat down to warm up. As she breathed in the warm air, footsteps approached. Flare leaned down and growled protectively as a young man, probably in his late 20s, wearing a red vest and ball cap, walked up. He smiled kindly. "I was wondering if you would ever make it up here, Mary Sanderson," he said. "How dost thou know me?" she asked as he sat down across from her. "Well, there's 2 reasons. 1, I'm your trial proctor. I've seen everything you've been through, so you can stop hiding Jirachi's cocoon now," he told her. Mary pulled the cocoon from under her cape. "The other reason is because your sister Sarah told me all about you." "You know my sister?" she gasped. "Yeah, we were, good friends." He blushed brightly. "My name is Red. Sarah told me you're a legendary tamer, so great that your first Pokemon was Rayquaza." "He was my first partner," Mary confirmed the story. "Tell me, how much did you rely on Rayquaza?" "He was an equal member of the team, but Broomy was a wonderful friend," Mary recalled sentimentally. "Why do you think legendary Pokemon find your presence so appealing?" Red questioned her. Mary thought for a while, then shrugged. "I'm not sure. Don't you remember what you told Archer?" he asked. "You keep the peace in your family by calming them. Your presence calms legendary Pokemon, and they flock to you because they know you'll care for them." He reached for the cocoon, but Mary kept hold. Red smiled. "It's all right. I won't hurt it." "Him," she corrected him. Red nodded. "Him." She handed him the cocoon. He put it to his ear and listened for a moment, then smiled. He handed it back to her. "You want Jirachi back, don't you?" "I miss him terribly. He did for me what no one else ever has. He calmed me." "Normally, if you win the final challenge, you can take one Pokemon back with you to Purgatory. We proctors usually don't permit legendary or mythical Pokemon," Red told her, and Mary's head drooped. Flare nuzzled her comfortingly, and Red smiled kindly. "But if you can beat me without losing one Pokemon, I'll permit it." "What?" "If you can beat me without losing one Pokemon in your final battle, I'll permit you to take Jirachi with you," Red repeated. "Shall we get to it?" Mary looked at Flare, who nodded. "Let's do it," Mary told him. Her team had trained hard for this, and she had everything at stake. Returning to her sisters, another trial cleared, and Billy returned to life. The blizzard whipped around them, blowing Mary's cape behind her. Red looked confident, but she was confident in her team, too. It was time. This was it. "Lettiba, let's go!" Red sent in his first Pokemon. "Why not? You're up!" Mary sent in her ace. Lettiba used Bug Buzz, which did a decent chunk of damage to Wynot. Mary had him use Whirlpool in order to feel out the moves. On the next turn, Lettiba's attack missed, which caused Wynot to be unable to attack. Bug Buzz hit again and did a little more damage, but Wynot lived. "Mirror Coat!" Mary called. The Wobbuffet blasted the damage back at double the power and knocked out the bug type. 1 down, 5 to go. Red sent in Wurmple, which surprised Mary as it was such a weak Pokemon, but she still sent in Flare to fight. All it took was 1 Fire Fang and the bug was down. Red nodded at her in approval. Then he sent in a Shieldon. Mary knew this was a Steel type, so Flare was still a good bet. Her first Heat Wave missed, and Shieldon hit with Ancient Power, causing a small chunk of damage. Flare unleashed a second Heat Wave, which drained it down to yellow. "Atta girl, Flare!" Mary said, and her Arcanine barked when Mary felt a chill run up her spine. Oh no. "Shieldon, use Metal Burst!" Red commanded. Shieldon did what Wynot could do, and blasted back its damage at twice the power. Flare howled as she was blasted back in front of Mary's eyes. Mary let out a scream as her fire type, her companion and sweet friend, fell dead in front of her. Flare was gone. Her chance to get Billy back was gone, and there was no way she could win this fight without her. She felt her hands start shaking as all the deaths came flooding back to her. Brutus, Rubix, Cynthia, Savior, Allie, Billy, Barbossa, and now Flare. This can't be happening. "Come on, Mary, don't give up now," Red told her as he healed his Shieldon. "If you win this fight, everyone comes back to life. You have so much to keep fighting for. Your Pokemon, your sisters, and yourself. Keep battling." I can't." Mary cradled her Arcanine's head in her arms. "Yes, you can. Show me the trainer that Sarah talked about for hours, that she looks up to and worked so hard to be more like during her journey here. Show me why your little sister loves you so much. Don't give up," he encouraged her. Rarity burst out of her ball and let out a battle cry. Mary looked at her, and Rarity's eyes gleamed brightly. She wasn't done yet. "Okay, Rarity. Let's do this," Mary told her. She made Flare comfortable in her Pokeball and hoped to see her again soon. "You surf at full power!" Rarity blasted water from her mouth and the tidal wave knocked out Shieldon with a crash. "All right, Mary, that's the spunk I wanted to see. Now show me more," Red said and threw his Pokeball. "Raikou, let's go!" His Raikou burst onto the field. "I once owned a Raikou, so I know how they work," Mary said and pulled her newest ball from her bag. She gave it a kiss. "It's up to you. Kronos, prepare for thy first and most important battle!" Her Dialga roared onto the field and Red grinned. "I get to see the legendary tamer in action. All right, Raikou, burst your stats with Calm Mind." Raikou powered up. "Now use Rain Dance!" Raikou summoned a powerful rainstorm that combined with the snow. "Kronos, use Earth Power and give it all you've got!" Mary commanded him through the freezing rain. Kronos slammed his titanium feet into the ground and it burst with power. Raikou took a big hit as his health dropped below half. Raikou retaliated with Discharge, but Kronos shook it off with ease, then looked at Mary with a toothy grin. She smiled back at him. He trusted her. "All right, Earth Power, again!" she ordered him, and Kronos took out the Raikou with another huge bang of his feet. "Very good, Mary. You just caught this deity, and Dialga trusts you with his life," Red noted, "but this battle isn't over yet. Execute, your turn!" "Kronos, return for now." She withdrew her dragon and pulled out another ball. "Chico, I'm counting on thee!" Her Zapdos screeched onto the field. Well, 2 legendaries. Very exciting, Red complimented her. Execute! Get rid of its pressure ability with Worry Seed! Chico, use Drill Peck! Chico did massive damage to Execute, but not enough to take it out. Psychic hurt, but not too much. Red had to heal stall Mary's advances, but he eventually stopped and Chico took out the Execute. Last Pokemon, so I'll make it count! Red sent in his Cradilly, so Mary switched back into Kronos, who was tickled by Ring Out. He used Aura Sphere, the move Rubik's had known, and it slammed hard into Cradilly. Cradilly tried to boost its defense with Stockpile, and Red heal stalled again, but Kronos saw his opportunity. Kronos! Aura Sphere! As hard as you can! Mary told him. Kronos took out the Cradilly, proudly handing Mary the victory. She fell to her knees in shock as Flare's Pokeball opened up and she pounced on Mary, tail wagging. She licked her all over as her other Pokemon were brought in from the meadows. Rubix, Allie, Cynthia, and Savior ran over to her and Rubix tackled her next. Barbossa, whom she'd lost so long ago, stampeded over and tackled Cobweb Jr., who was overjoyed to see his friend alive again. Mary cried and hugged every Pokemon who had fallen and everyone who didn't. She made Kronos lower his head so she could kiss him for winning the battle. Brutus was not among the returnees, but she knew he was at home, safe. Red cleared his throat and held up a glowing cocoon. Mary gasped as the threads unfolded, and in a flash, a sleeping Jirachi floated in mid-air. Mary slowly walked over and cradled him in her arms, tears streaking down her face. Billy's eyes fluttered open slowly, and he looked right into her moist eyes. "Mary?" he asked. "Billy," she sniffed. "Mary?" he repeated, blinking a couple of times. "Hi, Bilius." "Mary!" Billy suddenly burst from her arms and hugged her around the neck. "Mary, Mary, Mary! Billy is so happy to see Mary!" "Oh, my Billy, my sweet Billy, I love thee so much." Mary hugged him tightly and kissed him a few times. "I am so happy to see thee again, but it is time for me to go now." "Billy is going with Mary," Billy declared. Mary looked sad. "No, Mary cannot be sad." "I can't take you with me, Bilius," she confessed. "I did not adhere to Red's requirements for our battle. I lost one Pokemon." Billy floated over to Red and scrunched up his face. "Billy is going with Mary, Mr. Red! Billy is going with Mary!" her Jirachi shouted. Red couldn't help laughing. "I have a feeling if I don't let you go, I'll never hear the end of it, huh?" "You got that right." Billy crossed his arms, and Red chuckled again. "Well, Billy, you'll have to discuss that with the other Pokemon. I'm okay with it. But what if Rubix or Wynot wanted to go with her?" he told him. Billy floated over in front of all of Mary's Pokemon. "Friends, Billy would very much like to follow Mary back to Purgatory. Billy knows all of you love Mary very much, and Billy wants to take everyone too, but mean Mr. Red said only one of us can." Red snorted through his nose, and Mary had to stifle a chuckle. "Billy thinks he can help Mary at home. Mary works hard to make peace between her sisters, but does not always take care of herself. Billy will make sure Mary does take care of herself. Billy will also be there to help with Mary's sisters. Please, friends, let Billy go with Mary." He pleaded his case, and all the Pokemon talked it over. Finally, one at a time, everyone said goodbye to Mary. Flare licked her one last time. Hercules gave her a tight hug. Rubix nuzzled her cheek. Cynthia hugged her. Cobweb Jr. shared one last headbutt with her. Chico wrapped his wings around her and received a kiss. Kronos got a kiss too. Rarity wrapped her in a squeeze. Hunter gave her a small nibble. October picked her up in a steely bear hug. Allie wrapped her twin tails around her and cooed. Barbossa nudged her with his head, and Wynot gave her the biggest hug in salute of them all. Mary loved them all, and it broke her heart to leave them. She looked at Red. "I'm already taking care of Sarah's Pokemon. I think yours will get along with them," he promised her. "Thank thee, she said, and everyone bid farewell to Billy, who hovered over to her side. Together they were lifted up and started turning to dust. "Farewell, my sweet friends. I will never forget you. I hope we meet again."
"Bye, friends. Billy will miss you."
"Goodbye," Mary said, and she looked at her Pokemon until everything went dark. When she woke up, she was back in the cottage, snuggling Billy close to her. Cabby was at the foot of the bed asleep, and standing over her was... "Brutus!" she exclaimed, sitting up straight. She got up with Billy floating nearby, and she hugged her Charizard, who hugged her back happily. "I missed thee so much."
"Mary?"
a familiar voice said from the hall. "Sarah!" Mary gasped and dashed into the hall. Sarah was at the foot of the stairs. "Thank goodness! Sarah!" Mary ran downstairs, and the two sisters hugged each other tightly. Mary started crying immediately as the stress of her journey came flowing out. She poured her heart out to her sister about everything. Sarah, not used to being in this position, sat with her sister and calmed her down to the best of her ability. She listened, she learned, and she empathized with Mary. This was how her Kanto journey had gone. When the story was over, Mary felt much better.
"Thou art incredible, sister," Sarah told her. "Overcoming such hardship is not easy. I am very proud of thee."
"Thank thee, Sarah. I heard thy trial went very well," Mary said.
"Yes, it did. I was allowed to keep 2 Pokemon this time," Sarah said and called upstairs. "Come down, Allison! Honey!"
Her Ambipom swung down the stairs, and Mary grinned seeing her. "I had an Ambipom as well. She was a different color, and I called her Allie in your Ambipom's honor," Mary said, shaking Allison's paw. Then came a huge Ursaring. "Oh my word! That's an Ursaring!"
"Yep," Sarah beamed. "Honey was raised from an egg, and I adore her."
"Both of your Pokemon look as strong as Carlos," Mary said, looking them over.
"I would like to meet thy new Pokemon," Sarah requested.
"Of course! Bilius, come down here!" Mary called. Her Jirachi zoomed down the stairs.
"Mary, Mary, Mary! Billy loves Mary's house,"
he said excitedly, then looked at Sarah.
"Mary's sister! Mary's sister! Mary's sister is so pretty!"
Billy hovered around Sarah, and Sarah's jaw dropped.
Did thy Pokemon just speak?" she babbled.
"Yes, he can communicate through psychic powers," Mary told her.
"What is Mary's sister's name?" Billy asked. "My name is Sarah, Bilius," Sarah told him.
"Billy likes Sarah," Billy grinned and hugged her arm.
"Sarah, Sarah, Sarah, and Mary!"
He spied Sarah's Pokemon.
"New friends!"
Billy made fast friends with all of the Pokemon in the house. Mary was so relieved to be home. But she and Sarah were both concerned for Winifred when they saw her trial was beginning. They held her hands and hoped their sister would be home soon and that her trial was not as full of hardship as Mary's had been. The end.